Hello there. Good morning to you, good afternoon to you, and good evening to you from wherever you are joining me from. It is Maiyegun live, and it is also the continuation of our reading, Why We Struck. So if you are waking up this morning to this, please share the broadcast. Invite your friends, invite your not so friendly friends, and tell them that we have continued. Let's see. Yesterday, when we started reading this, Why We Struck by Adewale Ademoyega, the vivid account of what led to the first coup in Nigeria and those behind it, as well as their motive and what went wrong. This is such a vital piece of history that although the system had managed to use propaganda to change the entire story to different worthless kind of narratives. But accounts like these are very, very important. Many people have read this book, and many have heard about it, and they've never read it. Many who read this book years ago, some are like, I want it again, because somehow it is something that helps conscious minds to remain conscious and never gullible enough for the career criminals in Nigeria, successive career criminals in Nigeria, to ever be manipulated. They will never be manipulated. Yesterday, we are now sort of updated to why and the events that led to the January 15, 1966 coup. The narrative continues. Please share this. And if you are somehow doing something, you can actually continue doing what you are doing. You don't need to sit there and watch. Okay? If you have, you know what I mean. Well, thank you so much. So let us continue from where we stopped yesterday. And if there is any issue with the audio that I should know about, kindly bring it to my attention. Every half an hour, I will take a look at the comments so that I can know, if I am still communicating or not. So thank you so much. Let us continue. And this is the account of Major Adewale Ademoyega, the third person among the plotters of the first coup. Thank you. So let's continue for those who have been following. So I'm just going to continue from page 84. And this is me reading. Even among those earmarked for arrest, only 4 were northerners, 2 were westerners, and 2 were easterners. But the North had always had more than 50% of the intake of officers into the army since 1961, and more than 70% of the intake of the other ranks. What is that? Sorry. Let's hope that fixes that sound. a little bit. So therefore, if casualties were to happen, it was more likely to be in the proportion than anything else. I mean, in that proportion than anything else. The wicked propaganda that followed the coup was only made possible by the weakness and non-revolutionary principles of the Ironsi regime, which bore no semblance to the well-ordered and well-controlled government that was envisaged and could have been run by us if our plans were fully executed. Ironsi was supposed to be arrested. The coup, the plotters, they wanted Ironsi arrested. They wanted, in fact, they said they didn't have any plan of killing anyone. The plan was to arrest some of the top shots across the country, including in the military. Finally, it was unanimously agreed at that meeting that the coup should be staged simultaneously in all the regional capitals of the Federation. To this end, since there were no troops stationed in Benin, the Midwest capital, a small unit was to be sent from Enugu to put the plan into effect therein. Nzeogu was named as the commander for North, Hugh Soke for the East and Midwest, Ifeajuna and I for Lagos and West, respectively. The need to bring more of the middle-level officers, majors and lieutenant colonels into the planning and execution of the coup was discussed. But the few names that could be mentioned had to be dropped because their interpersonal connections would compromise the security of the planning. After 90 minutes of discussion, the meeting was over. We dispersed as if from a prayer meeting, since it was a Sunday and the Lord was in our midst. I drove Nzeogu back to Abeokuta, where he picked up his vehicle and journeyed back to the north the same day. That was how the meeting went. That was how our journey that began over the years developed and culminated in mutual friendship and trust. In the course of time, our common ideas had been gradually formed and trimmed even before the first and only formal meeting. Who stayed where and who did what was entirely decided according to our army postings, over which none of us had any control. All we did was to find officers on the spot who could act according to our plan, our principles. Who took part was entirely determined by the response of individual officers to our revolutionary call. They didn't even call it coup. Those plotters, they didn't even see it as coup. They believed that they were carrying out a revolution. And it would have been a revolution, not a coup d'etat like is recorded. It is, therefore, extremely impudent of Major General Alexandra Madebo to say, as he did in his book, that Major Nzeogu selected for his Lagos operation, Majors Ifeajuna, Anoforo, Okafor, and Ademoyega, who had personal grievances against various senior military commanders. Well, personally, I had no grievances against any senior military commander. And if I may ask, are coup staged merely because of grievances against certain officers? Were the postings in the Nigerian army done to enable aggrieved officers to be in Lagos for the coup? Madebo claimed that he was consulted before the coup. His response was neither principled nor patriotic, but rather tribalistic, and it would have been most unfortunate for Nigeria
if every officer were of his type? And can one not conclude from his book that it was unfortunate for the revolution to have had him, Madebo, close to and advising Nzeogu soon after the coup? Is it not obvious to all that he, Madebo, did not even understand the principles and objectives of the revolution, let alone the processes of preparation for and execution of the first phase thereof? After the one and only formal meeting of mid-November 1965, much devolved on Nzeogu, Ifeajuna, and myself. There was no more meeting of all the officers. But from time to time, 2 or 3 of us simply met to sort out some of the details of our preparation. I traveled to the north several times to see Nzeogu. On one occasion, we did a reconnaissance together of the various locations that must be taken over on the D-Day. When we were to reconnoiter the Sadaunos castle, Nzeogu suggested that we should take a lady with us so that we would seem to be visitors to Kaduna. I hurriedly went to town and invited a lady. She was to turn up at the officers' mess after closing at work. It was a Saturday. She failed to turn up at the right time and we could not postpone. So we set out. As Nzeogu was about to regret that the girl did not make it, we found another girl who went with us on the reconnaissance. Then Nzeogu laughed and said that when the coup would have been successfully accomplished, the disappointing girl would regret her failure to have joined on this trip. I also laughed, but the new lady had no clue about what we said, since we told her that we were only enjoying a Saturday afternoon drive. As a result of this reconnaissance, we discovered that the Premier's Lodge was totally separated from the Visitors' Lodge and conference hall adjacent to it. We also observed that the Premier's Lodge was apparently impregnable, having only one massive gate and no other entrance. Unless the gate was opened officially, no one would gain an entrance without blowing up the gate. Only a high-caliber tactical weapon like the 84mm Carl Gustav could be used to blow up the massive iron gate. Hence, Nzeogu knew that he had to launch a real attack on the lodge before gaining entry into it. On another visit to Kaduna in December, Nzeogu asked me to impress it on Ifeajuna to organize an internal security exercise, which would bring troops together in Lagos in a way similar to what he had organized in Kaduna. We could then safely use those troops on the D-Day. I conveyed this point to Ifeajuna and he actually attempted it, but he was immediately cautioned by his commander, Brigadier Maimalari. It was thus obvious that rehearsals were not possible in Lagos as they were in Kaduna. The battle group course went on without a hitch in Abeokuta until the first week of December 1965. There were 20 student officers on the course, all captains. I indoctrinated and orientated them towards the revolutionary thought concept. I also held personal interviews with all of them. I took the whole group on an official reconnaissance of all the strategic installations in Lagos, and I taught them how important positions could be held or defended in time of war or other military actions. This was acknowledged as a very successful exercise, and the student officers were particularly happy that they were being introduced to the practical aspects of their defensive duties. If the coup took place before the course ended, many of the officers would have carried out any duty allotted to them without looking back, and our Lagos operation would have been as successful as the Kaduna operation came to be. But the course ended and both the student officers and the troops dispersed before a date could be fixed for the coup. Hence, the usefulness of the troops and the availability of the student officers was lost to us. And this was one of the crucial factors that made all the difference between our Lagos and Kaduna operations. Nonetheless, of the 20 student officers, only 3 came out top as regards their capability and response to revolutionary ideas and practices. These were Captains Abisoye, Captain Bullier, Captain Ewanya. Incidentally, Abisoye was also the highest rated student on the course. When the course was ended and student officers returned to their units, only Bullier went to Kaduna and did eventually take part in the coup under Nzeogu. The first blow to our plan came in early December when it became known that Major Gude Soke, our strongman in Enugu, was soon to depart for India on a course. We were not sure how soon it would go. If it was to be in the new year, we might have staged the coup before his departure. But if he departed before the coup, it will leave us with a big problem. It will not be easy to find a substitute, since the captains and majors of the battalion had proved irresponsive. Soke made efforts to postpone his departure for as long as possible, and our normal preparations continued. Exercise Damisa. As was earlier explained, it was not possible to organize rehearsals for the coup in Lagos, but this was possible in Kaduna. Therefore, Exercise Damisa was planned and organized by Nzeogu. Damisa is the Hausa word for leopard. In African folk tales, a leopard could change the color of his skin, and that was what the exercise was about. The continuous training of officers and men had always been a feature of life in the armed forces. What made Exercise Damisa special was not that it was a night exercise. That was normal. But that it was also designed to serve an additional and peculiar purpose. That purpose was not explained to the majority of the officers and men taking part in the exercise until D-Day. There had been many daylight exercises with the same troops at the rehearsal of the night exercise on January 14, 1966. Actually, the command of the NMTC was vested in Colonel R. Shodende, but from September 1965, he had been appointed as Deputy Commandant of the Nigerian Defense Academy in Kaduna. Prior to that, Lieutenant Colonel Fajuyi had been posted to NMTC from the 1st Battalion, Enugu. Since he was to run the battleground course, he moved to Abeokuta at the beginning of September 1965. Consequently, Nzeogu, who was the chief instructor of the NMTC in Kaduna, was also acting as his commandant and was therefore able to plan his own exercises and adjust the dates, as we were forced to shift the date of the coup from time to time. The movement of the political and military personnel whose availability was important to the staging of the coup was responsible for the frequent shift in the date of the coup. We particularly spread out our nets to get information on the movement of the relevant persons. It was no mean task to piece together available information on their movements and work out a date when the most important ones will be in their respective domains. Added to this was the problem of synchronizing the date for all the regional capitals. Military communication had to be sparingly used, and personal contact proved to be more and more necessary. Meanwhile, the political situation was getting worse throughout the country. Riots staged, especially in the West, but also in Lagos and in the Benue province of the North. The Balewa government was inefficient. It failed completely to find solutions to the problems of the nation. Gradually, life became more and more unsafe. Motorists were waylaid, killed, and their vehicles set on fire. Political opponents were killed and their houses burned. But Balewa pretended that all was normal and under control throughout the country. He even found time to host a meeting of the prime ministers of the Commonwealth for the purpose of discussing the unilateral declaration of independence by Ian Smith of Zimbabwe. While that conference went on, riots, arson, and looting claimed people's lives and property, even inside Lagos metropolis. After the battle group course in Abeokuta, the instructing staff dispersed on holidays. I stayed at the officers' mess, Apapa, where I was to spend part of my holidays. A holiday with a difference on account of the coup. I had promised to keep in touch with Lieutenant Colonel Fajiri, who stayed for a while in Abeokuta. However, as Christmas approached, he departed for his hometown in Ekiti, and I was no longer able to keep in touch with him till the coup was staged. Throughout December, we were on the alert and poised to act if the dates could click. I took a few days to relax at Takwa Bay when Ifeanyi suddenly came to me on December 27, bringing me news of the movement of the important personalities around Lagos and a flight ticket to Kaduna. Very early the following day, I crossed to Lagos and was soon at Ikeja en route to Kaduna. The dates did not click because the leaders in the north were flying to Mecca for the Umrah Hajj in the opening days of the new year. So I returned to Takwa Bay. NNA planned to wallop the West. It was at this time that I met Chief H.O. Davis for the first time. He was a famous politician who had been in the nationalist struggle since 1941. He was then a federal minister in the Balewa government and had come to spend the New Year holidays at his retreat just behind the Army Chalet at Tekwa Bay. I discovered him just by chance. I had gone to the back of the chalet and was attracted by the presence of a lady standing in the adjacent compound. As I moved closer, I saw a gentleman sitting nearby. I had a second look and I thought I could recognize that person. I greeted him and I asked if he was Chief Davis, and he said yes. I soon got into deep conversation with him on the political situation in the country. I was particularly interested to know what the federal government's views was. Apart from Balewa's public statements, Chief Davis made it clear to me that the federal government had no solution to the political crisis. He said that everybody was just waiting to see what will happen next, and that nobody knew exactly what that would be. But surely something was bound to happen. I left Chief Davis feeling that the Balewa government has something up his sleeve. Otherwise, the minister would not be so emphatic that something was bound to happen. When I returned to the officers' mess, Apapa, on January 3rd, 1966, I went to work with Ifeanyi. After extensive prodding, we discovered that Balewa government had a terrible plan to bring the army fully to operate in the West for the purpose of eliminating the elites of that region, especially the intellectuals who were believed to be behind the intransigence of people against the Akintola government. It was for this reason that the government had attacked the intellectuals of the region, especially those at Ife, intimidating and victimizing them for their refusal to support it. People like Tai Sholari of Mayflower School, Ikene, were among those marked down. It was also intended that if the plan succeeded in the West, the next target would be the East. The federal government was to use loyal troops for this purpose, and the 4th Battalion in Ibadan, commanded by Lieutenant Colonel Lagema, and the 2nd Battalion in Ikeja, temporarily commanded by Major Igboba, but soon to be taken over by Lieutenant Colonel Gowon, were designated for this assignment. I want to take a quick break and say something before I miss that. Did you hear that name? Tafawa Balewa's government, according to this coup plotters record, from their own discovery, Tafawa Balewa's government was planning to eliminate the intelligentsias of the West, Yorubas. And once they are done, they were going to move to the East, destroy and kill and remove all of their intelligentsias too. Okay? And whatever other agenda was can further be foisted on us. And Gowon was recruited for that. And Gowon finally carried out the genocide anyway, but this time around, not on the Yorubas, but on the Biafrans. Then you will say the Igbos, the Jaws, the Efiks, the BPOs, everyone from that part of the old Eastern region, they lost over 5 million people under Gowon, who later became head of state and led Nigeria to the civil war. Just be mindful of that, all right? So Gowon was recruited for a genocide anyway, but the genocide, by the way, wasn't meant to be against the people per se, but against those who they considered as intelligent people, outspoken people, or that, and they wanted to use the army for that. Let us continue. The break is over. The operation was fixed for the 3rd week of January 1966, when the Sardauna would have returned from his pilgrimage, and Lieutenant Colonel Gowon would have completed his takeover of the Ikeja Battalion. In preparation for this horrible move by the federal government, the high echelons of the army and the police were being reshuffled. Major General Ironsi was ordered to proceed on leave from mid-January. He was to be relieved by Brigadier Maimalari over the head of Brigadier Ademulegun. Lieutenant Colonel Ujoku was temporarily command 2nd Brigade headquarters at Apapa. In the police force, Inspector General Edet was sent on leave from December 20, 1965. The officer closest to him was retired, and the 3rd officer, Alhaji Kam Salem, was brought in as the new Inspector General. The stage was thus set for the proper walloping of Obga rioters of the West. From our own stance, this proposed whipping of the West was a most dastardly plan. Anoforo, Onwatuegu, and I had each in turn commanded the troops in Makurdi against the TV rioters who were opposed to the high-handedness and oppression of the Sardauna government of the North. We knew from practical experience that it was not force that was being used to reconcile people, but the individual commanders' ability to come to terms with them. This was the reason why some of us achieved more success than others in reducing the fierceness of the encounters. For instance, in the period that I commanded the detachment from May to July 1965, there was no single civilian casualty. But before me and soon afterwards, things were very much different. Final preparation. In view of this, we had to move fast, but also with much caution, as the atmosphere was intensely charged, both politically and militarily. In such a circumstance, discussions with other officers had to be carefully made. Yet there was one arrangement that we had left till date was fixed. It was the arrangement for the release of political prisoners, particularly Ifawolowo. Now that our own date had been tentatively fixed for mid-January, it became necessary to gear up that arrangement. At the end of the first week in January, Major Anuforo and I arranged to meet Captain Udiaja, a young engineering graduate from the Royal Military College of Science, Shrivenham, UK. I don't even know I'm hearing that for the first time. I'm actually seeing that for the first time, so I don't know how to pronounce that. So I'll just say Shrivenham, UK. We met in Major Chukwuka's house at the Ikeja cantonment, but Chukwuka himself was not there. Having briefed Udiaja generally and got his consent, we gave him his task. He was to fly in a special plane provided for the purpose to Calabar on the morning of the D-Day to effect the release of Chief Awolowo and bring him to Lagos on the plane. We had already arranged for a plane of the Nigerian Air Force to be made available for that morning. This was done through Major Unzeogu, not Unzeogu of the Air Force. The captain was to be assisted by a young officer on the D-Day. Udiaja accepted this task and soon left Anuforo and I to continue with our discussions. About 20 minutes later, Anuforo suddenly gripped me and said, "Look, Wale, there is nothing stopping Udiaja from revealing the whole plan to Lieutenant Colonel Arthur Unegbe, with whom he was known to be quite close. Of course, Unegbe would have immediately given the whole plan to Brigadier Maimalari, who in turn would have related everything to Balewa. In the twinkling of an eye, we jumped into my sports car. I had never sped so fast within the metropolis of Lagos. Within 17 minutes, we were at the gate of the officers' mess, Apapa. We met Captain Udiaja just coming out of the mess. "Where are you going?" we asked him. He replied that he was going to see Colonel Unegbe. In another minute, he would have driven off and we would have been finished without having struck a single blow. We called him into my quarter in the mess and warned him of the danger of revealing the plan to Unegbe. That night, he did not go to see Unegbe. But the long-dreaded blow fell on us earlier that week. Major Chude Soke had left for India, and before his departure, he could not find a substitute for our operation in Enugu and Benin. Once again, Ifeajuna and I went to work. It took another week to find a young officer, Lieutenant Oguchi, who was to return to Enugu after a short course in Lagos. This young officer was briefed on his assignment, which was simply the arrest of Premier Opara of the East and Premier Osadebe. Osadebe of the Midwest and their right-hand men. As a young officer, Lieutenant Ugechi was not competent to move a lot of troops out of his unit, but acting discreetly, he could move anything up to a platoon of 13 men. To justify himself in case of any serious challenge, he had to be covered by an order given him by a senior officer. But his unit, the 1st Battalion based in Enugu, was under the operational command of the 2nd Brigade based at Apapa, of which Ifeajuana was the Brigade Major, BM. He would therefore be covered by an order given by the BM. This was not the correct military procedure, but it would do. Hence, the subaltern was given written orders to carry out the operation on the H hour of the D-Day. Lieutenant Oguchi took the order and promised to comply. This young officer left Lagos on January 13, just about the time the D-Day was fixed. He therefore had the correct idea of our final timing. However, he was to wait for the order to move, which was to be officially communicated to him over the Army Net communications on the eve of the D-Day. Events moved very fast that month. By January 10, I was again in Kaduna, Through some senior civil servant I telephoned, I was able to confirm that Umrah Hajj group, led by the Sardauna, will be confirmed in Lagos. Will be back in Kaduna on January 12 and 13. It had been confirmed in Lagos that the Commonwealth Prime Minister's Conference was due to end on the 12th, and that most of the delegates will leave Lagos almost immediately. Therefore, Nzeugwu and I fixed the D-Day for Saturday, January 15. I was to confirm this by signal from Lagos. When I returned to Lagos, Ifeajuna and I resumed work to confirm movements and dates. On January 12, I moved my luggage from the Apapa mess to Ikoyi to stay in one of the quarters belonging to the Federal Guards mess in preparation for the D-Day. By the 13th, our new officer for Enugu and Bini had departed. Our operations were now being finalized. Therefore, I sent a signal through the Army Communication Network to Nzeugwu saying, Major Ademoyega will leave Lagos after 41 days holiday and we arrive in Kaduna after 51 days. In simple terms, this meant that the coup would take off on the night of the 14th and continue into the morning of 15th. So the die was cast. Late on the 14th, news reached us that the Sardauna had been having a meeting in Kaduna on that day with Chief Akintola of the West, and that both Brigadier Ademulegun and Lieutenant Colonel Lagema were in attendance. It was obvious to us that they might be putting final touches to their planned walloping of the West, but we felt confident that we were already one step ahead. That is the end of chapter 4. Thank you so much for listening to me and listening to this like you did yesterday. But remember, you need to share it as many times as possible. Get it across. A lot of us will probably prefer to sit down and just listen to this than sit down and read it ourselves. But if you do want to buy this book, to own a copy, and you are in Nigeria, I have been told you can get this from any bookshop, major bookshops in Nigeria, while we struck. And online too. I recommend you buy it and get it sent to you from Nigeria, from the main bookshops. They are ripping people off online. The first time I attempted to buy this book, it was priced 660 something pounds. I was like, why? So I never got it until a member of this platform ordered us one from Nigeria and delivered here. But if you enjoy just listening, then you are welcome to my party. You're welcome to the temple. Right. Let us now continue and to chapter 5. The H hour by which all actions must commence had been fixed for the 0200 hour. That is 2 a.m. January 15. The officer who was to execute the plan in Enugu and Benin had left Lagos on the 13th and had only to be notified to carry on within the early hours on the 15th. The officer who was to operate in Ibadan was based at Abeokuta. He too was a relatively young officer, although he was commanding his own unit, which was the 2nd Field Battery, or 2 Field Battery, they called, a unit under the command of a 2nd Brigade. Captain Nwobosi had reported to Lagos early on the 14th and obtained written orders from Ifeajuna, commanding him to carry out the Ibadan operation. Again, this did not follow the laid-down procedure, but served as a cover. Nwobosi returned to Abeokuta before nightfall. His own unit, which was newly formed, had no transport. Therefore, he went to the 2nd Reconnaissance Squadron in the same barracks, pretending that he had a genuine message from Major Obienu, the squadron commander. He told the squadron captain, Remawa, to supply him with a Land Rover and a 3-ton truck. The latter did. Before midnight, Nwobosi and his second in command were ready to move with about 25 of their battery men. At midnight, Nwobosi was waiting by the telephone to receive the final order from Lagos to move. At about 2300 hours, 11 p.m., a group of officers were assembled at the military quarter of Major Ifejuna at Apapa. This included officers who took part in the planning of the coup, namely Ifejuna, Anuforo, Okafor Shukuka, and myself. With us were a number of young officers, captains, and subalterns who had only just been summoned from the officers' mess for the operations. Not more than 2 of them had previous knowledge of the operation. One of these was a staff officer working with Ifejuna, and the other was a subaltern working with Major Okafor. 2 officers were conspicuously absent from the gathering. One was Major Obienu, commander of the 2nd Reconnaissance Squadron based at Abeokuta. He had been briefed well in advance and was supposed to attend this gathering, so that after the address, he would proceed to Abeokuta to bring his armored vehicles to back up our Lagos operation. It was thought that he might yet turn up, and we kept our expectation of him alive. The other was young captain who at the first light of day was to fly in a special plane to Calabar to effect the release of Chief Awolowo. He too had not turned up, and we expected that he would do so later. We were all addressed by Ifejuna, who highlighted the political situation in the Federation, pointing out that the politicians had failed the people. In effect, there was nothing to follow the political chaos except the disintegration of the country, unless there were men of goodwill who would rally round to fight for the survival of their country. Now that the moment of action had come, it was essential for those called upon to rise to the occasion. The response of the young officers was enthusiastic and almost unanimous. Only one captain asked to be excused, but he was soon persuaded to stay. After this, officers were allocated to their various duties. Major Ifejuna and 2 subalterns were to arrest the Prime Minister, Sir Abubakar, and the Federal Minister for Finance, Chief Okotiebo. Major Anuforo and 1 subaltern were to arrest Colonel K. Muhammad and Lieutenant Colonel Unegbe. Major Okafor, 1 captain and a subaltern were assigned to arrest Major General Ironsi and Brigadier Maimalari. Major Chukuka and a subaltern were to arrest Lieutenant Colonel Pam. Major Ademoyega, a captain, and 3 subalterns were to occupy and control all strategic locations of the federal capital, including the control room at Lion Building, the police headquarters, the telephone exchange, Parliament Building, the Nigeria External Communications Operations Room, and the Nigerian Broadcasting Corporation, NBC. This group was also to set up roadblocks at strategic locations, and Major Ademoyega was to make the early morning broadcast over the NBC. As soon as the duties were allotted, we all moved to the 2nd Brigade headquarters, where troops were called out and ordered to get into their combat suits and bear their arms for internal security operations. At the same time, Abeokuta was contacted by telephone, and Nwobosi was ordered to go ahead. A signal was sent to Enugu ordering Oguchi also to go ahead. Arms and ammunition were issued to officers and men from the brigade headquarters armory. For transport, Land Rovers and 3-tonners were laid out and shared between the groups. Those who had no military transport were used were to use their personal cars. At 2 a.m., we dispersed to carry out our various duties. We were to reassemble after our initial task had been completed at the Federal Gas Officers' Mess, Dodon Barracks, so as to review our successes and to reallocate duties for the second phase. The second phase had previously been arranged as follows. A, to the completion of any uncompleted task of phase 1. B, the occupation and control of the various military units in Lagos, including the military headquarters, to effect a favorable disposition of all troops. C, immediate link up with the outstations, Abeokuta, Kaduna, Ibadan, and Enugu. D, the control of the airport. And E, the initial broadcast over the network of the NBC. I took my own group straight to the P&T exchange with a view to cutting off any further use of the telephones. I ordered those at the control room to stop forthwith to link up callers, and they did. But the automatic system was not easy to put out of action. I ordered the workers to take me to the switch gear, but they led me to the basement of the building and showed me that it was not accessible to them. Therefore, I ordered the technicians to start the manual disconnection of the automatic linkages. They obeyed under the watchful supervision of a subaltern and a few of the junior ranks. Next, I was at the Lion building, at both the security desk on the ground floor and at the control room upstairs. I told the officers and men on duty that the army was engaged on special operations. I ordered them not to receive or transmit messages by radio or telephone. And I instructed a subaltern and some men to see that my orders were carried out. After that, I was at the net, and I went straight to the officer in charge and ordered him to stop receiving and transmitting any messages whatsoever. He obeyed. I then detailed a subaltern and some junior ranks to take charge and see that my orders remain effective. I drove straight to the NBC, which was yet closed down. It was at 3:20 a.m. I posted a few other ranks under the command of a sergeant to the station to hold the ground until I had returned much later to make a broadcast on the event. After that, I posted a few roadblocks to be set up at strategic positions on the two main exits from Lagos to Ojota via Maryland and Lagos to Agege via Mushin. After this, I was at the Federal Gas Officers' Mess, Ikoyi. Close on my heels came Major Anuforo's group. They had accomplished their own task, having arrested Colonel K. Muhammad. Lieutenant Colonel Unegbe had resisted arrest, and in the scuffle, he had been shot. Next came Major Shukuka's group. They had accomplished their own task also, having arrested Lieutenant Colonel Pam. After them came Ifa Juna's group. They too accomplished their task, having arrested the Prime Minister and the Federal Finance Minister. In addition, as they were returning to base, they saw Brigadier Maimalari escaping from the attempts of the Okafor groups to arrest him. They, the Ifa Juna group, wanted to arrest him, but in the scuffle, he was shot. I went out to look for Okafor's group. I met Okafor himself coming from the Federal Gas Barracks. What has happened to you, and what have you achieved? I shouted at him. I have just lost my command. Okafor said slowly. The news sent cold sweat through my spine. I almost shivered. Oh no, what have you done wrong? What's all this about? I spoke to my RSM just now, and he nearly shot me. He said the GOC had been to the barracks, and I did not meet him there. Explained Okafor. What? Did he escape from you? I asked. The GOC was in Ronsio, Agoyin Rosio. So, did he escape from you? I asked. I went to his house to arrest him. I found that he was not there. He had not yet returned from the party. Which party? I asked. Everybody had left the party since 9 last night. No, it was another party. He had been to another party after my Malari's party. Now he had been in here. He commanded the troops not to take any orders from me. and none of them would obey me now. In fact, they were ready to shoot me. It was shocking. It was horrible. If we could no longer use the federal guards, what troop could we use? Where were the men? Which was the force to rely upon? Why was it that your own group did not achieve anything? I asked of Okafor, no answer. I returned to the main group at the officers' mess. Okafor came along with his bad news, and General Rossi had not been found at home when he went there. He was said to have gone to another party after my malaries, but he had since surfaced at the Dodon barracks and succeeded in raising troops against us, claiming that he did not know what was happening. After that, he was said to have driven to the 2nd Battalion barracks at Ikeja to raise more troops against us. Yet none of the other groups had seen him to accost and arrest him. The news of Irosi's escape came as a shock to all of us. If the federal guards were already made hostile, then the officers' mess was no longer tenable to us. It could no longer be used as our tactical headquarters. We could no longer, what was our answer to this new development? There were only 2 possible safety valves. One, we had many roadblocks inside the city. If Irosi had got into the hands of our troops, they would have arrested him. 2, if Major Obienu had reported at the outskirts of the town as he was previously ordered, it would be available to us for a fight against Irosi. Since Obienu did not turn up at all on January 14 to confirm his preparedness for action, we were not sure whether or not he had turned up with his squadron. It would be a good thing if he had come. We needed to link up with him. The rendezvous as had been previously, I think it's actually pronounced a rendezvous. Oyibo. Well, I'll pronounce it as a rendezvous because I think I've heard that before, but I usually say it's rendezvous. Anyway, so the rendezvous had been previously fixed at Airport Junction on Abeokuta Road. At this junction, it became totally untactical to keep carrying the arrested military officers with us. For one thing, they too were highly skilled military tacticians and could turn the situation to their own advantage. For another, our decision had become somewhat slippery, and we needed to be on our toes. It was at this moment that those officers were taken away and shot. It was also at this point that Lieutenant Colonel Lagema, who had only arrived in Lagos late on the 14th, bringing down Sadauno's last message on the walloping of the West, was arrested and shot. After all this, Ipajuna, Okafor, and a few young officers left officers' mess for the place of our scheduled rendezvous. They still had the arrested prime minister with them. They were soon followed by Anuforo, who carried a few young officers with him in 2 private cars. Chukwuka followed in a Land Rover. He too had some young officers with him. I trailed behind them in a Land Rover, followed by a 3-tonner. I had some young officers and many officers in the 3-tonner. The bodies of the fallen officers were there, and so also was the arrested federal finance minister, Okotiebo. As we drove through the township, I asked at the checkpoint if Irosi had been sighted. The first at Idumota approach to the old Kata Bridge. Yes, indeed, they had seen his staff car when they were just setting up the roadblock. It had driven off without being checked. By that account, he had passed the place soon after 3 o'clock. He had had a full hour to have settled himself at 2nd Battalion location. If nobody had stopped him, other roadblocks had not seen him at all. Soon, I was at the rendezvous on Agege Motor Road at the airport junction. Anuforo's group were there. No ferret armored vehicles from Abeokuta. No trace of the Ifeajuna's group. Chukwuka's group had not come. Why? Ifeajuna was driving ahead of Anuforo and did not seem to have stopped at all at the rendezvous. Anuforo had sent an officer to the gate of the Ikeja cantonment. There were no signs of the Ferre or Ifejuna's group. But the 2nd Battalion had been roused by Ironsi, and they were already holding the gate in full strength. It became obvious that Major Obienu had defaulted altogether. Even then, where now was Ifejuna? He could be waiting for us further out of town, explained Anuforo. We waited a while to be sure, then we drove off in a convoy along Abeokuta Road, past Agege and past Ota. Still, there was no trace of Ifejuna and Obienu. Even Chukwuka had not caught up with us. We halted. I conferred with Anuforo. Had we now lost Lagos? Had our own men deserted us? Okafor had lost the Federal Guards. As Ifejuna also lost the 2nd Brigade headquarters, as Obienu lost the 2nd Reconnaissance Squadron, where were we headed? Where are we heading to? We were now at the horn of a dilemma. It was Anuforo who came up with the notion that even if Obienu were not to be found in Abeokuta, we could still get a squadron for our use. In that case, why didn't we drive down to Abeokuta? And if Obienu was there, we might persuade him to come with us. I agreed. We drove up in a convoy of 2 cars, 1 Land Rover and 1 3-tonner, towards Abeokuta. Midway, I halted Anuforo because of the cargo of corpses in the 3-tonner. It would be inexpedient to carry that to town. It was already 5 a.m. Hence, some young officers and men were deployed so as to prevent vehicles from either direction reaching our location. Then I ordered the corpses brought down and taken into the bush. The arrested finance minister was still in the truck, and it was no longer expedient to carry him around with us. As such, he was taken into the bush and shot. Since there were no digging implements, a few soldiers were detailed to remain there on guard till digging implements were brought to bury the bodies. The convoy moved again. It was 6:30 in the morning when we made Abeokuta barracks. Obienu was not found. He had not returned to station since the previous day and left no orders for troops deployment. Anuforo used his former position to get troops mobilized without waiting for formal order from their own commander or from the brigade headquarters in Apapa. We now had a troop consisting of 4 ferrets in our hands, and we were ready to return to Lagos for further actions against Ironsi. While the ferret got ready, some young officers left with digging implements to the site of the corpses and organized their burial. They then waited nearby till we arrived, and together we drove to Lagos. The cars were in front, the ferrets followed. The Land Rovers and 3-tonners were behind. Anuforo and I rode in the ferrets, each of us commanding a pair of them. There was no squadron officer with us, a subaltern. There was 1 squadron officer with us, a subaltern rather. It was in one of the ferrets. A convoy movement was never the fastest thing in the world. It was about 11 o'clock before we made Lagos. Now there were more roadblocks, all loyal to Ironsi, and with orders to arrest unfriendly forces, who in fact were unfriendly forces. There was no clear definition. News soon reached us that some of our officers had been arrested. So what was our immediate mission? This was quite clear to us, to get Ironsi. But now that we were in Lagos, where exactly was Ironsi? Some said Ikeja. Some said he had passed through to Apapa. Yet others said that he had returned to Ikoyi. We made straight for Ikoyi, while the young officers in the cars were sent around to bring us news. Soon we were in Ikoyi. I observed that the NBC was now occupied in bigger strength. I approached the gate and was told that a certain broadcast had been made in the morning, and that since then, nobody had been allowed to go in. The GOC was not around either. A little further away, there were new troops at the entrance to the officers' mess. The troops had orders not to allow anybody to go in. But again, the GOC was not there and had not been seen around. Once more, I inferred with Anuporo, we considered the effect of shooting our way into the NBC to make a broadcast to the nation that the army had taken over. This would immediately bring about an open clash between us and the reactionary forces of Ironsi. The only objection to this was that we did not have revolutionary troops with us, and it would therefore be unwise to start an open fight. On the other hand, we could not contact Kaduna or Enugu since we had no access to army signal network, and the public telephones had been disrupted. We decided at once to leave Lagos for Ironsi. It was quicker to make Enugu than Kaduna from Lagos. As such, we decided to drive to Enugu in the ferret, so that if our own troops had been successful there, we could contact Kaduna. Now, it was already midday. Ironsi was not yet located, but it was known that he had summoned troops from Ibadan. No news about Enugu, and no news about Kaduna. The young officers who were formerly with us were now flung afield. Some still fished for news for us. Some were back in their unit, and others had already been arrested by troops loyal to Ironsi. Most of what we knew were by interrogating the troops around the NBC and the Federal Gas Officers' Mess. They freely answered our questions, assuming that we were on Ironsi's side, because we simply sat on the ferret as if newly summoned from another station. Nevertheless, those troops held their ground firmly. If we tried to enter into any of the positions into any military barrack whatsoever, we would have had to shoot our way in. The situation had become highly explosive. Any move that was contrary to the orders of Ironsi would have sparked off a bloody fight. At this juncture, I led the troop of our only 4 ferrets, and we drove from Ikoyi through Ebutemeta and Ikorodu Road. After the Maryland junction, there was a heavy roadblock. Again, as if we were troops summoned by Ironsi, we were allowed to pass, and we drove towards Ikorodu. Soon after passing the Majidun Bridge, we met troops of the 4th Battalion from Ibadan in Land Rovers and 3-tonners driving towards Lagos. I checked my time. It was 1:15 in the afternoon. I recalled that about 14 hours before, 5 majors were gathered to start this action. Now, only 2 of us were together. The remainder had vanished from our side since 3:30 in the midnight. In the night, that is to say, only 4 hours after we started, and only 1.5 hours since each hour, when action actually began, we had lost Ifajuna and Okafor, both of whom were our only sources of troops, weapons, communication, and confidence. If we did not have those 2 in the first place, in view of the strategic post that they were holding, we would not have started at all. Now we were left in the lodge. Chukwuka, too, had not joined up with us, and Obieno did not report with his troops. We had lost valuable time seeking for those things that should have been made available to us, and which we previously believed were available to us. We had lost troops, ground, and time. We have also lost Lagos to Ironsi. What a terrible situation. So let me take a break, a tea break. Thank you. So it is a long read, if you must know, and that is just like the first hour. We are currently going into how the whole plan was looking so good until it wasn't so good anymore. And then things started falling apart right in the middle of it. Maha, drink tea. So let us continue. For those who are still here with us, though, we drove on through Shagamu to Ijebu-Ode. The East-Wide rioters of that area were still surging towards the road in hundreds and in various locations along the route between Lagos and Ijebu-Ode. They carried twigs and chanted war songs in continuation of their political uprising against the finished government of Akintola. As they surged forward and saw military vehicles, they hesitated to give a fight. They moved off the road and were silent. They broke into their war song again, running into the bush. A young officer in one of the ferrets made to shoot at the crowd, but I forbade him, thinking in my mind that these people should be dancing and rejoicing because their enemies had been seized and eliminated. But meanwhile, it was hidden from their eyes. By the time we arrived at Ijebu-Ode, in those slow-moving ferrets, it was 3:45 in the afternoon. We stopped at the first petrol station to refuel. 4 o'clock met us at the petrol station, and a radio was turned aloud therein. Then a dreadful announcement was made. There has been a mutiny by a dissident section of the Nigerian army this morning. The Prime Minister, Sir Abubakar Tafawa Balewa, and the Federal Minister of Finance, Chief Festus Okotie-Eboh, were apprehended and taken to an unknown destination. And the radio continued, of course. As soon as the squadron subaltern heard this announcement, he felt horrified. He summoned the drivers of the ferret and, without saying a word to either Anuforo or me, led the 4 ferrets away towards Lagos. Anuforo was the first to observe this. He rushed out of the station, commandeered the first available car, and pursued the ferrets. He soon overtook them and tried to halt the leading ferret commander by the subaltern, but the young officer used the ferret to damage the car. He cocked his gun and pointed it towards Anuforo, ready to shoot, so the latter allowed him to go. After that, Anuforo commandeered another vehicle and drove back to the petrol station where I was waiting. With the loss of the ferret, our Lagos operations of January 15 came to an abrupt end. We could no longer return to Lagos. And with the recent radio announcement, the possibility of getting troops in Enugu had vanished. There was no news from the other capitals. The announcement did not indicate what had happened in Enugu, Benin, Ibadan, and Kaduna. The only course open to us was to continue the journey to Benin and Enugu. If our troop had acted in those places, it would be easy for us to contact Kaduna. So, agreeing, Anuforo and I continued our journey using civilian vehicles. Ibadan. Now, our loss of ground and power in Lagos had not actually been repeated anywhere else. Our original plan did not include the takeover of the 5 existing governments of the Federation and the appointment of governors in Ibadan, Enugu, Benin, and Kaduna. That would have been a continuation of the status quo, which we did not want. Our real aim was to knock off the existing government and immediately split the country into smaller units with a more powerful government in the center. This was the reason the orders were not given to our colleagues in Ibadan, Enugu, and Benin to take over the government or make radio announcements. This was the reason why Nzeogu, who had unqualified success in Kaduna, did not rush to make any announcement over the radio. The all-important and only radio announcement was to have come from Lagos. It was because we failed to make the announcement in Lagos, and Erosi came on the air with a contrary announcement that Nzeogu had to act for the revolution by making his own announcement. Later in the day in Kaduna. It is essential to be clear on this point before examining the success of the Ibadan and Enugu operations. The unit that operated for us in Ibadan left Abeokuta around midnight. It consisted of 2 officers and 21 other ranks. They traveled in a Land Rover and a 3-tonner. They had written orders to arrest both Akintola and his deputy, Chief Fani Kayode. Having made Ibadan before the H hour, which was 2 a.m., 200 hours, they disrupted both the telephone communication and the electric power supply. At the H hour, they were at the house of Chief Fani Kayode. Having gained entry into his house, they summoned the deputy premier, who surrendered to them without a fight. Fani Kayode came towards the soldiers with both hands up and shouting, "I surrender, I surrender. Don't kill me, oh, don't kill me, oh. I beg, don't kill me, oh. I beg, don't kill me, oh." The soldiers started to ask themselves if that was really the man they called Fani Kayode. Sorry, Fani Power. Okay, they said the soldiers started to ask themselves if that was really the man called Fani Power. Those who knew him confirmed that he was. As in all other cases, the soldiers had orders not to kill him or kill anybody who surrendered. So they took him away under arrest. Later, they were at Premier Lodge. They tried to use the same method to arrest Chief Akintola. The latter gave them a fight and opened gunfire on them, wounding the unit commander, Captain Nwobosi, and his second in command. In the melee that followed, Chief Akintola was shot. Captain Nwobosi had been ordered to bring his unit's 100 mm pack howitzer with him with some live rounds to Lagos after his Ibadan operation. Nwobosi acted accordingly. He ordered one of his sergeants to return to Abeokuta and collect the gun plus live ammunition and a team of 12 gunners. They were to report to the 2nd Battalion Barracks Ikeja. The sergeant did exactly as he was commanded. But when he arrived at Ikeja cantonment with his crew, they were all arrested. Before then, Captain Nwobosi himself and his second in command and a few soldiers had driven straight from Ibadan to Lagos in the Land Rover. They took from Ibadan to Lagos, they took the arrested Chief Fani Kayode with them. They made straight for the Federal Guards Officers' Mess, Ikoyi. Arriving there at about 7 o'clock in the morning, unfortunately, they landed into the hands of Ironsi's troops and were all arrested. Later, their own captive, Chief Fani Kayode, was released by the reactionaries. In Enugu, the story of the Enugu operation was perpetrated by a mishap. First, Lieutenant Oguchi did not leave Lagos on January 13, as was previously planned, because his military vehicle was not ready. Finally, he left on the 14th but suffered a breakdown on the way. He eventually arrived at Enugu in the early hours of the 15th. He had borne written orders with him from Lagos. However, on his arrival at Enugu, he found the final signal that ordered him to go ahead with the execution of the task. He organized a small body of troops with a Land Rover and a 3-tonner. He sent a small detachment to the Eastern Nigeria Broadcasting Service. This detachment seized the station, stopped the normal program, and ordered the broadcasters to play only military music while awaiting latest news from Lagos. At the same time, Oguchi himself made for the Premier's Lodge. Therein, he found that he had not only the Premier Dr. Okpara in his hand, but also an august visitor, Archbishop Makarios, the president of Cyprus, who, after the conclusion of the Commonwealth Prime Minister's Conference in Lagos on January 12th, had arrived in Enugu on the 13th on a state visit. With such a man of international repute present, Lieutenant Oguchi could do no more than bide his time. A couple of hours later, when the Archbishop had departed, he placed Dr. Opara under house arrest, deploying his troop to guard the lodge. He himself went to the ENBS and made a tentative announcement that the army had taken over power. He stopped at that while he awaited more news from Lagos. Later on, his own troops were replaced by those sent on Irosi's orders, and Dr. Opara was transferred to a prison detention. Because of this lateness to start, Oguchi had not yet sent troops to Benin before Irosi's men took over. In Kaduna, our D-Day started earliest in Kaduna. Exercise Damisa, which had been organized for several weeks and rehearsed on the evening of January 13, was finally staged. Essentially, Exercise Damisa was a night exercise aimed at capturing enemy objectives and holding the grounds captured. On the D-Day, the exercise was completed at about 1:30 hours. That's 1:30 a.m. Then the officers were summoned and briefed about the political situation in the country. They were told about the decision of the revolutionary officers to bring the situation under control by a prompt military action which had been planned to be nationwide. The officers who hailed from every part of the country were given the option to participate in the action or withdraw. All of them enthusiastically volunteered to participate, and they were given specific orders as follows. A, the arrest of the Northern Premier, the Sardauna of Sokoto, and Alhaji Aliyu Makama Bida, the Northern Region Minister of Finance, Major Nzeogu, a captain, and 2 subalterns. The arrest of Northern Governor, Sir Kashim Ibrahim, and Brigadier Ademolegun, that was to be carried out by Major Onwatuegu. C, the arrest of Colonel R.A. Shodeinde was to be carried out by Captain Ude and a subaltern. D, the occupation of strategic locations, Captain Bule and 6 subalterns. In addition, this group had the task of informing the brigade headquarters staff officers of the coup to ensure their support. The staff officers included Major Alfonso Kechi, the brigade major. After the orders, live ammunitions were issued to all groups. Vehicles were allocated and the groups dispersed to their various locations. The Nzeogu group made for the Premier's Lodge. It was an impregnable castle with a massive iron gate fitted with automatic alarms. Because of this, 5 rounds of the 84mm Carl Gustav anti-tank recoilless rifle had to be fired to destroy the gate and gain entrance into the lodge. During the firing of the Carl Gustav, the front part of the gate caught fire. In spite of that, the Premier resisted arrest and sought to escape from the building. In the scuffle that ensued, he was shot. After that, the group made for the quarters of Alhaji Aliyu Makama Bida. He was missed altogether as he had traveled out of town. Next, the group went to the residence of Colonel Shodeinde. He resisted arrest and was shot. Then the group moved to the brigade headquarters to receive the report of the remainder of the operation. Major Nzeogu, who had been injured during the attack on the Premier's Lodge, was treated there. Soon, Major Owatuegu reported to the headquarters with the arrested Governor Sir K. Ibrahim, who had conducted himself most gently and had been treated cautiously. He was detained at the headquarters for some hours, but was later allowed to go home. On the other hand, Brigadier Ademolegun was not brought to the headquarters under arrest. He had been shot. Captain Bule's group took control of all the strategic points in the city, including the local station of the Nigerian Broadcasting Corporation, the ammunition service depot, the Northern Nigerian radio and television stations, the telephone exchange, the state house, and so on. In addition, they set up roadblocks on the various approaches to the town. Having done this, they contacted the staff officers of the brigade headquarters and informed them of the revolution, and at the same time requested their support. By the first light of January 15, Major Nzeogu was in complete control of the situation in Kaduna, but there were still some unit commanders in the city, and in Zaria were still some unit commanders, in Zaria and Kano, who were not part of the revolution and had yet to be contacted in order to know whether they would support the revolution. This included Major A. Madebo of the Nigerian Army Artillery, Major Azan U. Kassina of the Nigerian Reconnaissance Corps NRC, Lieutenant Colonel Bassey of the Nigerian Army Depot at Zaria, and Lieutenant Colonel Ojukwu of the 5th Battalion, Kano. It was Captain Bule who had orders to contact Keshi, and it was the latter who contacted Madebo. Madebo found that the subalterns of his own unit had already turned full-fledged revolutionaries to the point of obeying only Nzeogu. Therefore, he reluctantly gave his support, but was minded to foil the revolution. This was because Madebo was tribalistic to the core. For instance, he had told Ifejuna long before the coup that Madebo, believed that in Nigeria, tribal loyalties were stronger than national loyalty. Nzeogu himself went to see Major Azan U. Kassina at home. He discussed the situation with the latter, who albeit rather reluctantly gave his support and ordered the officers of his own unit to report to Nzeogu for further deployment. Next, Nzeogu sent a message to Lieutenant Colonel Bassey, a veteran of the Second World War. The latter did not know what the revolution was all about. Nonetheless, he submitted to the trend of things as they appeared and gave in to the revolution. There remained Lieutenant Colonel Ojukwu. Ojukwu was both crafty and selfish, and would neither give nor withhold his loyalty. He was running with the hare and chasing with the hounds. He was an opportunist who put himself above safety of the nation. When at first Nzeogu contacted him on the telephone, he was fully in agreement with the revolution. Soon after that, he was in touch with Ironsi, to whom he pledged his loyalty. After that, he was playing hide and seek with Nzeogu, mainly biding his time. The activities of Nzeogu on the morning of the coup were directed towards the consolidation of his night's victory. He moved quite fast to ensure that those officers who did not participate in the coup were given their chances to declare either way. But Nigerians, being what they were, fought shy of the truth and declared for the revolution, when in fact they were opposed to it. Admittedly though, if the revolution had been luckier, if it had remained in the hands of his forebears, it would certainly have survived and triumphed over its enemies. Unfortunately, that was not so. Now, having received the professions of loyalty, Nzeogu proceeded to bring all the military and air force units of the northern region under his express command. This step was absolutely necessary. In the first place, it had been a regular military drill to hold firmly to the ground won. That ground to him was northern Nigeria, and he had to hold it tight. Secondly, by noon on the 15th, it had become clear to him that operations in Lagos had been compromised. He had received neither military nor civilian communication from any of us. Therefore, he could see that the battle was not yet fully won. Like the soldier that he was, Nzeogu was prepared and willing to carry on with the fight. By the morning of 15th, he had summoned the regional civil servant to his headquarters. Having received their pledges of loyalty, he briefed them on how to carry on their duties under his interim administration. He knew that things would soon have to change, but in the meantime, the governing of the people did not have to be interrupted. In the same way, he brought the police under control, and having received their pledge of loyalty, ordered them to carry on their duties with deference to the spirit of the revolution. Again, he knew that things were bound to change if the revolution succeeded. As for the politicians, no further action was contemplated against them than that they should sign a pledge to refrain from further politicking while they return to their private businesses. This also was an action in furtherance of the principle of the revolution. Only a few of them were detained in the prison custody. After midday on the 15th, when the situation report from Lagos showed clearly that the capital was not in the hands of the revolutionaries, Nzeugwu did the only right and proper thing. He immediately prepared a broadcast which helped to establish it quite clearly to the south and as well to the outside world that the north was firmly in the hands of the revolutionaries. Later the same day, after Ironsi had broadcast his wicked and reactionary message about the so-called rebels, Nzeugwu went on the air and broadcast his brilliant, revolutionary, and highly edifying declarations. It went thus: in the name of the Supreme Council of the Revolution of the Nigerian Armed Forces, I declare martial law over the northern province of Nigeria. The constitution is suspended, and the regional government and elected assemblies are hereby dissolved. All political, cultural, tribal, and trade union activities, all together with all demonstrations and unauthorized gatherings, excluding religious worship, are banned until further notice. The aim of the Revolutionary Council is to establish a strong, united, and prosperous nation, free from corruption and internal strife. Our method of achieving this is strictly military, but we have no doubt that every Nigerian will give us maximum cooperation by assisting the regime and not disturbing the peace during the slight changes that are taking place. I am to assure all foreigners living and working in this part of Nigeria that their rights will continue to be respected. All treaty obligations previously entered into with any nation will be respected. And we hope that such nations will respect our country's territorial integrity and will avoid taking sides with enemies of the revolution and enemies of the people. My dear countrymen, you will hear and probably see a lot being done by certain bodies charged by the Supreme Council with the duties of national integration, supreme justice, general security, and property recovery. As an interim measure, all permanent secretaries, corporation chairmen, and senior heads of departments are allowed to make decisions until new organs are functioning. So long as such decisions are not contrary to the aims and wishes of the Supreme Council, no minister or parliamentary secretary possesses administrative or other forms of control over any ministry, even if they are not considered too dangerous to be arrested. This is not a time for long speech making. And so let me acquaint you with the proclamation in the extraordinary orders of the day, which the Supreme Council has promulgated. This will be modified as the situation improves. You are hereby warned that looting, arson, homosexuality, rape, embezzlement, bribery, and corruption, obstruction of the revolution, sabotage, subversion, false alarms, and assistance to foreign invaders are all offenses punishable by death sentence. Demonstrations and unauthorized assembly, non-cooperation with the revolutionary troops are punishable in a grave manner up to death. Refusal or neglect to perform national duties or any task that may of necessity be ordered by the local military commanders in support of the change will be punishable by a sentence imposed by the local military commander. Spying, harmful or injurious publication and broadcast of troops' movements or action will be punished by any suitable sentence deemed fit by the local military commander. Shouting of slogans, loitering, and rowdy behavior will be rectified by any sentence of incarceration or any more severe sentence deemed fit by the local military commander. Doubtful loyalty will be penalized by imprisonment or any more severe punishment. Illegal possession or carrying of firearms, smuggling, or trying to escape with documents, valuables, including money or other asset vital to the running of any establishment will be punished by death sentence. Wavering or sitting on the fence or failing to declare open loyalty. Instead, the revolution will be regarded as an act of hostility, punishable by any sentence deemed suitable by the local military commander. Tearing down an order of the day or proclamation or other authorized notices will be penalized by death. This is the end of the extraordinary order of the day, which you will soon begin to see displayed in public. My dear countrymen, no citizen should have anything to fear so long as that citizen is law-abiding, and if that citizen has religiously obeyed the native laws of the country and those set down in every heart and conscience since October 1, 1960. Our enemies are the political profiteers, the swindlers, the men in high and low places that seek bribes and demand 10%. Those that seek to keep the country divided permanently so that they can remain in office as ministers or VIPs at least, the tribalists, the nepotists, those that make the country look big for nothing before international circles, those that have corrupted our society and put the Nigerian political calendar back by their words and deeds. Like good soldiers we are not promising anything miraculous or spectacular. But what we do promise every law-abiding citizen is freedom from fear and all forms of oppression, freedom from general inefficiency, and freedom to live and strive in every field of human endeavor, both nationally and internationally. We promise that you will no more be ashamed to say that you are Nigerians. I leave you with a message of good wishes and ask for your support at all times so that our land, watered by the Niger and Benue, between the sandy waste and Gulf of Guinea, washed in salt by the almighty Atlantic, shall not distract Nigerians from gaining sway in any great aspect of international endeavor. My dear countrymen, this is the end of this speech. I wish you all good luck, and I hope you will cooperate to the fullest in this job which we have set for ourselves of establishing a prosperous nation and achieving solidarity. Thank you very much, and goodbye for now. So that was the broadcast of the man, Kaduna Unzeogu. I was never to be. I'll take, what do you call it, tea break. So it's been a long read, and it's still going to be longer. So I am thinking that maybe when we finish this chapter, let me see how many of it is left. So when we finish this chapter, the end of revolution, it's actually long. This may take me another hour, by the way. So when that is finished, we can then go to chapter 6. And you know something, chapter 6 is all about the Ironsi after the revolution. So that is when, if the time is fair enough, I could take calls, okay? Like get our reactions, okay? Where you can react to all of these as we normally do on Maiyegun's Diary Politico, okay? So I think I should get on with it, right? Go on. Oh dear. Thank you. So let us continue now. After that broadcast, brethren, the writer continues. The content of this broadcast are clear and need no further elaboration. Suffice is to say that they showed that the revolution was duly born and that it was capable of being nurtured to life in the competent hands of some of those who conceived it and labored for it. One second. Anyway, so but if the revolution child was turned into a stillborn, it was because the water of the world into which it was born became poisonous to it and killed it. This brave and powerful broadcast had the effect of according full credibility to the revolution, while at the same time it damnified the bigotry of Ironsi and his reactionary clique. Having achieved this much, Nzegu was quick to make plans for the control of the remainder of Nigeria. To execute this plan, by the morning of 16th January, he called a conference of all the officers in Kaduna to give them his orders. First, he divided all his troops into 3 crack task forces. The first task force was to move north and take Zaria and Kano, to consolidate his control of those areas, to make the forces therein available for his southern operations. The second task was to advance southwest through Jeba to Ibadan. It was to take Ibadan and prepare the ground for launching into Lagos. The third task force was to advance southeast to Enugu through Makurdi. It was to take Enugu and launch southwest to take Benin and to hold the 2 regions firmly for the revolution. This was an excellent plan, revolutionary in principle and perfectly tactical in concept. There was no doubt that this plan would have succeeded completely. For one thing, success in such a movement, and as such movement, was always on the side of the revolutionaries. Secondly, the morale of the participating officers and men was extremely high and conducive to success. Thirdly, all attempts by Ironsi to fight the revolutionaries would have failed woefully, because the nation itself was jubilant that the coup had been staged and that peace had returned to the country. The acting president of the Federation, Dr. Nwafo Orizu, could not appoint a substitute prime minister since he did not know the fate of Alhaji Abubakar. Ministers were ready to hand over government of the Federation to the armed forces. Everybody everywhere in the Federation rejoiced at the overthrow of Balewa government and toasted the revolutionaries. University students throughout the Federation hailed Nzegu and the revolutionaries. These were proofs that the revolution was popular. Unfortunately, it was at this stage that the revolution proved most unlucky. For as soon as Nzegu finished his orders, and before the officers dispersed to prepare for the battle, Major Madebo sought Nzegu's attention and impressed it on him that the revolutionary battle was very unnecessary. He argued that since Ironsi had accepted the coup as a fait accompli, it was all that Nzegu could wish for. He insisted that Nzegu would be demonstrating an unbridled lust for power if he launched his proposed attack. He advised Nzegu to cancel his plan and surrender to Ironsi, who would gladly carry out Nzegu's revolutionary plans. But it was an act of deceit. Madiebo was being mischievous. He did not reveal to Nzegu that he was in constant contact with Ironsi and Gowon, who had both instructed him to destroy Nzegu's revolution. He pretended to be talking in earnest to Nzegu and posed to be a friend of the revolution. By this, Madiebo showed himself as an enemy of a revolutionary Nigeria. This was the reason why an officer of Madiebo caliber did not reach the peak of his career and outputs, except in the tribal and reactionary war of Ojukwu in Biafra. Madiebo acted as an instrument for Ojukwu and helped the latter to prolong the dreadful and wasteful war, which did nothing but destroy the cream of the Igbo race. I say this much because the initial wave of success in Kaduna was soon depressed by the reactionaries, headed in this case by Madiebo. He, in collaboration with Ironsi and Gowon, worked to extinguish the light of the revolution. Nzegu took Madiebo's deceit for good advice, stood down the troops, and cancelled the plan. The reactionaries recorded success only at the barracks, where they, in effect, staged a palace coup against the revolution. It was in this way that Ironsi usurped the revolution to his advantage and put some of the revolutionary officers to flight. Maiyegun was destroying Nzegu's will to fight, not on the battlefield where he could never have succeeded, but right at his military headquarters where he, Nzegu, expected to be talking to another revolutionary officer, his own comrade in arms, but rather, unfortunately, he was talking to a wolf in sheep's skin, an enemy who behaved as a friend and who had the avowed intention of getting a quick and tidy end to Nzegu's revolution. Later on the 16th, when it was becoming obvious that Ojukwu was not faithful to the revolution, Nzegu requested Maiyegun to go to Kaduna, both to collect money for the troop and to speak to Ojukwu. Maiyegun tactfully turned down the request and suggested that a junior officer should be sent. Nzegu agreed and sent Captain Ude. The latter was promptly arrested by Ojukwu. Nzegu's natural reaction was to send a crack force under the command of Major Tim Onwatuegu to knock some sense into the head of Ojukwu in Kano. This force was ready by the first light of the 17th. It was well armed and provided with adequate supporting weapons and transport. It had got ready to go forth when Maiyegun sighted it and intervened against it. To the detriment of the revolution, he suggested that the force should be stopped and that he himself would speak to Ojukwu and obtain the release of Ude. It was another most dreadful blow against the development of the revolutionary spirit and power in Nigeria. If the Kano exploit had gone forth, it would have been successful. It would have dealt a blow to the bigotry of Ojukwu, and revisionists of his ilk would have learned their lesson. More than that, it would have boosted the morale of the corps of budding revolutionaries under the leadership of Nzegu. The aspirations contrasted with those of the reactionaries, who were materialistic, tribalistic, and jingoistic. These same people, some 20 months later, were bombing, shelling, and destroying the people of Eastern Nigeria under the leadership of General Yakubu Gowon. This same Maiyegun, who had earlier refused to go to Kano for the sake of the revolution, later agreed to act for the sake of Ojukwu, or rather for the sake of reaction, because the revolutionaries had been put to shame. With this, the palace coup against the revolution had succeeded almost completely. One more pressure, and the revolutionary child will breathe its last. The Nigeria Air Force. A word cannot but be said about the Nigerian Air Force and the part it played in the revolution. The Air Force was launched in 1963 when 4 army officers and a few cadets formed the nucleus of its officer corps. By late 1964, it had acquired a few Dornier 27 aircraft, which were small tactical planes. With this, it had started to join in various military exercises. This included the Maiduguri exercises of October 1964, the Makurdi anti-TV operations of 1965, the battle group training exercises of October 1965, and the similar missions. Up till late 1965, the aircraft were mainly flown by German officers, while young Nigerian Air Force pilots were being trained. That same year, the Air Force acquired a few German transport planes for the movement of troops and stores. On the day that the revolution was born in Kaduna, the young Nigerian Air Force pilots were prompt to respond to the quickening tempo of the spirit in the north. These young officers flew their tactical planes around and dominated the airspace of Kaduna in solidarity with Nzegu and in support of the revolution. They flew as far as Zaria and Kano to show the flag of the revolution. At the instance of Nzegu, they prepared to participate in the military operation plan to take control of the south. They were to give support to ground forces and to use transport planes to convey combat forces, supporting weapons and vehicles to the battle areas. They would have done a lot to bring success to the cause of the revolution. And as the Kaduna base was the only Air Force base in those days, our forces would have dominated the air throughout Nigeria. Forces among the young Air Force officers was Lieutenant Amuchenwa, who led and encouraged other young officers to the utter discomfiture of their German trainers. They showed themselves capable of taking their aircraft into battle. The last straw. As was pointed out above, it required the exertion of only a little pressure for the revolutionary child to capitulate. This last pressure was exerted by Maiyegun. Later on the 17th, after the Kano operation had been called off, after having successfully, on 3 previous occasions, diverted Nzegu from his course, Maiyegun took liberty for license and drove his dagger home. He made Nzegu feel that to pursue his revolutionary aims against Nrosi would smell of personal ambition, and he wanted Nzegu to believe that such an ambition was not the aim of the revolution. He put it to Nzegu as if the army was always the same army, no difference in principle, no difference in objectives, no difference in method. He spoke as if Nrosi was synonymous with Nzegu and as if both were interchangeable. He completely ignored the truth that revolution was totally different from reaction and that Nzegu was totally different from Nrosi. He ignored the truth that he himself was acting on instructions that were destructive to the person, principle, and the forces that Nzegu stood for. He pretended as if he was acting on his own initiative, as if he was acting on a principle of sincerity, and as if he meant well for Nzegu and his revolutionary forces. It was a combination of trickery, flattery, deception, and beguilement. Unfortunately for the revolution, while this last and destructive pressure was being asserted, Anuforo and I, both of whom would have abated the pressure by preventing Maiyegun from influencing Nzegu, were only a few miles away, slowly making it towards Kaduna by train. What happened to us in Lagos had so beaten us hollow that we were rather disoriented. By the time that we got to Enugu early on the 16th and heard that Nzegu had succeeded in Kaduna, it did not dawn on us that he might need our help and support very badly. It did not occur to us that a lot of initiative was still to be taken by the revolutionary forces and that such initiative might be lost if we did not make Kaduna in time. Nrosi had already taken control of Enugu and posted Lieutenant Colonel Ejo there early on the 15th. Ejo had already taken over both the government of Eastern Nigeria and the control of all the troops there. That was a lot faster than we had anticipated, and we realized that Nrosi was moving fast to cash in on our success. We knew very little about the extent of Nzegu's success. Little did we realize that he was thirsty for our moral, military, and psychological support. Therefore, rather than commandeer a vehicle and make it post-haste to Kaduna, we entered a late afternoon train and inched our way up north, arriving early on the 18th, but too late. By that time, Maiyegun, acting on instructions from Nrosi and Gowon, had pressed Nzegu into agreeing to hand over power to Nrosi. Maiyegun did not work alone. He found a useful ally in Lieutenant Colonel Nwawo, the Nigerian Army attaché in London, who was specially flown down to speak to Nzegu. Nwawo had been a known friend of Nzegu, but he belonged to the old brigade of officers who grew from the ranks. In short, he was Nrosi's type and did not grasp the principle of the revolution. He made it out as if he came to Nzegu as a friend and was speaking in the national interest. He pretended as if he carried a message of truth from Nrosi, when in fact it was merely being used as an instrument of decoy, deceit, bad faith, and revision. He invoked his long-standing friendship with Nzegu and won his ear, though not his heart. By the evening of 17th of January, Nzegu had agreed to hand over power to Nrosi and to follow Nwawo to Lagos. Before he did, he laid down 5 conditions which were to be fulfilled to enable him to cooperate with Nronsi. These were A guarantee of safety for himself, his officers, and all men who took part in the January 15 revolution. B, a guarantee for them of freedom from legal prosecution then or at any later time. C, compensation to be paid to the families of all officers and men who lost their lives during the coup. D, the release of all officers and men who were detained in the South. E, the assurance that the people whom we fought to remove would not be returned to office. These 5 conditions were accepted by Nronsi on the phone and were personally accepted on his behalf by Nwanwo, whom he had sent specially for this purpose, and particularly to assure Nzeogu of his personal safety in Lagos. Nzeogu had made up his mind to leave for Lagos before Anuforo and I surfaced at the Kaduna officers' mess early on the 18th. Nzeogu was shocked to see us because rumors had it that we had all been killed in Lagos. He briefed us on past events by saying we had a plan to attack South, to destroy the forces of reaction. I jumped for joy and interjected, "Thanks heaven, let's go." But we had stepped down. He retorted, and another cold stream ran down my spine. It was the second since 15th, and my rising hope was lost again. Then Nzeogu went through the event as they happened. He highlighted this moment of triumph, and as he overcame the maneuver of Sardauna, he stressed the depth of his anguish when he heard that we were all killed down south. He expressed his reluctance to negotiate with a man like Nronsi. Then he emphasized his loneliness when he heard no more revolutionary voices around him, but voices of reaction and revisionism. To sum it all up, he had been through the height of happiness and the depth of despair in the last 4 days. And the result was that he was now ready to hand over the reign of the government of the North to the newly appointed military governor, Major, now promoted Lieutenant Colonel, Hassan U. Katsina. I had had enough shocks in the previous 4 days, so I simply laughed. The first person to reap the benefit of the palace coup was Major Hassan. He had now been promoted and had also been given a princely kingdom. How would he use these opportunities? To finish the revolution and wipe out his memory? I laughed again. Events mock at human foresight, and nothing is certain but the unforeseen. I recalled. For the next 2 days, I stayed very warmly with my friend Nzeogu in the same officers' mess building, which we both shared before. Well, that's a little bit kind of a touchy, by the way. Anyway, which we both shared before I left for Abeokuta in September 1965. This time, there were 4 of us sharing the 2 rooms. While I paired with Anuforo in my former room, Nzeogu paired with Obasanjo in his own room. Obasanjo had just arrived back in Nigeria on the 17th after a military course in India. He was full of praise and admiration for Nzeogu and for all the officers and men of the revolution. He believed that it was a high-level achievement in spite of our loss of the South to Nronsi and our subsequent failure to take over the government of the Federation. Obasanjo regretted that he was not around to have taken part in the revolution. Certainly, he gave us his unqualified support and hoped with us that things might yet turn in our favor if Nzeogu was truly given a chance to participate in the military government in Lagos. It is a real shame that the same Obasanjo who expressed his support for the revolution in 1966 had turned around and written damnable things about Nzeogu, with whom he used to share the same bed, and the January 15 revolution. There are other instances in his book in which Obasanjo maligned and damaged the reputation of his closest friends and associates, but history will never forgive him. The end of the revolution. What Nronsi promised Nzeogu was that the latter would be co-opted into the military government in Lagos, so that he would have a hand in the reshaping of the destiny of Nigeria. If this promise had been kept, Nzegu would have seen to it that all of us regained our position in the army, and that we also took part in bringing revolutionary ideas to the government. In such a case, revisionism and reaction would have been curtailed, and the repercussions of inactions that occurred under the regime of Nronsi would have been staved off. But Nronsi had no intention of keeping his promise to Nzegu, and he never did. Before Nzegu left Kaduna, we appraised the situation and agreed that all would not be lost if he partook of the military government in Lagos. We also agreed that all would not be lost if Nronsi observed the 5 conditions agreed upon. Therefore, we all shared a note of optimism before Nzegu left the mess on the morning of the 20th for the brigade headquarters in Kaduna. After the brigade headquarters, a short ceremony was staged. There was a parade. Nzegu took the salute and formally handed over the reins of government of northern Nigeria to Lieutenant Colonel Hassan Katsina. It was a public ceremony. The press, the radio, and the television were present. Together with the world press, Hassan made a brief speech in praise of Nzegu. He lauded the selflessness of his fight and principles. He also promised to stand by those principles and purpose for which Nzegu fought. After that, he embraced Nzegu, and both of them parted as comrades in arms. Nzegu went from there to the airport and flew to Lagos. But as he landed in Lagos, unlike the warm embrace that Hassan gave him, and contrary to all the assurances given on the telephone and personally through Colonel Nwawo, Nzegu landed into the harsh, cold, menacing embrace of guns. A whole 84mm Carl Gustav anti-tank recoilless rifle, the type that he had used to destroy Sadaunos Castle, was mounted upon a Land Rover and was fully charged and cocked and pointed at him. In addition, several machine guns and rifles were also mounted and cocked and pointed at him. Even if Nzegu had a plane full of armed soldiers to fight for him, he would still have found himself fully overwhelmed by the amount of weapons that were got ready for him in Lagos. Whereas Nzegu had simply traveled in non-combat military dress and completely unarmed. Even Nwawo, who promised Nzegu a heaven of safety, was now ashamed that he had brought his so-called friend into this shameful situation. Of course, there is no value in a promise made by an enemy. Nronsi and Gowon organized those hardware of a welcome, and thereby showed themselves to be paramount and incorrigible enemies of the revolution. Nzegu behaved himself and was not shot. He was escorted straight from the airport to the maximum security prison in Kirikiri to join those officers and men of his revolution who had already been arrested, beaten up, tortured, and detained there. With the arrest and detention of Nzegu, the revolution could be said to have ended. What remained was the hunt for the few members of the revolution who were still in freedom. This included Anuforo and myself. We were still in Kaduna, but did not resume our military duties because we were being hunted for detention. Also hunted were Onwatuegu and Ude, both of whom had resumed their normal duties at the NMTC Kaduna. Ifeajuna was also at large. Unknown to us at that time, he had driven straight from the Federal Guards Officers' Mess towards Abeokuta without waiting at our rendezvous. Having passed Ota, he stopped somewhere along the road, took the arrested Prime Minister into the bush, and had him shot. After that, he drove straight to Enugu, where he parked his Mercedes-Benz car and bid farewell to Don Okafor. Then, a personal friend of his and poet, Chris Okigbo, was said to have driven him to the Nigerian Dahomey border, which is close to Lagos, from where he journeyed to Ghana. In Ghana, he was received in audience by Osagiefo Kwame Nkrumah, who was said to have been delighted that the feudalistic and retrogressive Balewa government of Nigeria had been overthrown. He therefore gave Ifeajuna political asylum and lodged him with Sam G. Ikoku, who himself was a fugitive from the tyranny of the Balewa government. It was not until Nkrumah had been overthrown by the Afrifa coup of February 24, 1966, and a new military government, which was friendly to the Nronsi government of Nigeria, came to power, that Ifeajuna was forced out and returned to Nigeria. By then, all his revolutionary colleagues had been detained, and Ifeajuna was sent to jail to join us in detention. It was Ifeajuna's unilateral, personal, and short-sighted flight to Ghana that made the propagandists of Gowon's regime to spread the false notion that our coup was sponsored by Ghana. But nothing could be further from the truth. Much as many of us admire the militant anti-imperialism and pan-Africanism of Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, we certainly realize that he was a bourgeois revolutionary. He was by no means a soldier statesman, the type that Nasir was, who could inspire young military revolutionaries as we were. Nkrumah, to my mind, was not really a socialist. At best, he was a totalitarian welfareist. He did not mobilize or educate the masses of Ghana. If our own revolution had taken off, we really would have had a very little in common with Nkrumah, except the idea of Pan-Africanism, which was not peculiar to him, and which he pursued in his own personal and self-aggrandizement manner. Ifeajuna did not return to Nigeria until late March 1966, by which time the revolutionary child which he helped to conceive and which he did so much to bring to life had died. Anuforo left for Enugu to see his family. Over there, he met Major Chukwuka, who had not been allowed to return to his former duty in Lagos, but was being hunted. Before long, both were invited to the army barracks, where they were arrested and sent to Lagos for detention at Kirikiri. 2 weeks after the arrest of Uzogu, Owatuegu and I were invited that I was extremely dangerous. The British police officer in charge summoned me to a special room. Then he called a few policemen who were in mufti and winked to them. They suddenly surrounded me and dealt heavy blows on me. I did not struggle with them. They pushed me to the floor and pressed me down. I thought they would produce a knife and cut my throat, but they ransacked my pockets and pants and gleefully declared no weapons. After that, they chained my hands, took me to a waiting Land Rover, to which Owatuegu was also brought, chained but not assaulted. We were driven to the airport, from where we were flown to Lagos and detained inside the maximum security prison, Kirikiri prison. Captain Ude was quietly arrested and sent to the same prison to join us. Thus, the first revolutionary child of Nigeria died completely. But why did it die? 4 important reasons were responsible for this. The first was the fickleness of some of us who planned and executed the coup. An officer like Don Okafor was from the ranks. He joined the army in 1951 and was not commissioned until 1960. As such, he had spent a longer part of his career in the ranks and had developed a conservative attitude. It would have been different if he grasped the principles of revolutionism and was himself fundamentally revolutionary. He was the commander of the Federal Guards by appointment, and that made his consent to the revolution invaluable. I had always been skeptical about his ability to perform. On more than 3 different occasions, I expressed my doubt to Ifeajuna and suggested that he put a more dynamic officer in charge of such a sensitive duty as arresting the GOC. I even volunteered myself, but he was adamant. He claimed that he was sure that Okafor would do that assignment faithfully, and that in any case, he had a captain to help him. More than anything else, it was the failure of Okafor's mission that cost us the loss of Lagos, and consequently of the revolution. All the same, it must be admitted that if Nronsi was away from his residence and he had shooting going on elsewhere, he might not return home, but act exactly as he did. In that case, it was Okafor's misfortune to have missed his most important target. The next most important cause of our failure was the behavior of Ifeajuna himself. Having seen that Ironsi had got loose and was already raising troops against us, Ifeajuna took Okafor with him, and both of them suddenly disappeared from our midst. This raised the serious question of whether or not there was a common collusion between the two of them, and whether Okafor's failure to arrest the GOC was not a case of deliberate or willful omission. To my mind, and to be quite honest, Ifeajuna should have been angry with Okafor the same way that I was angry with him. Then, if Ifeajuna had been faithful to me like I was to him, he should have stuck to me, and both of us together would have planned the next line of action. This ought to be the natural course of things, because Ifeajuna and I had worked together alone on this Lagos sector project for the previous 3 months, and more or less to the exclusion of the other majors who were brought in individually as the need for them arose. Why the sudden change of front? This matter later brought a serious argument between myself and Ifeajuna when we were both detained together at Uyo prison. That was in early April 1966, a few weeks after he had been repatriated to Nigeria. This argument became so serious that both of us exchanged blows, and it was Dr. Mbanugo, then a political detainee in the same prison, who separated us. After the fight, we came together and became friends again. The action of Ifeajuna on the morning of the coup was definitely questionable, but it could hardly be blamed for treachery. It seemed more like a weakness of character. After all, he successfully carried out his own task and part of Okafor's tasks. That was excellent. It only remained for both of us together to solve another Okafor's problems. Actually, the time we were preparing for the coup, Ifeajuna was holding such a sensitive post in the army that within our own group, it was the pivot on whom the Lagos operation turned. Since I was privy to all these plans and he kept no secret from me, I ruled out treasury, probably after doing his own bit. The next action seemed too much for him, and he suddenly chose to seek safety in flight. If that was the case, he must be forgiven because he is now dead. As for Don Okafor, I have already expressed something about his shortcomings, but those who would rather accuse him of double dealing should ask themselves, why did the same Okafor fail to arrest Brigadier Maimalari? I feel sure that even Alex Maidiebo, the reactionary who saw red in the Lagos revolutionaries, could not give a cogent reasons for the failure of Don Okafor to deal with Maimalari, as Maidiebo claimed that Okafor had boasted. As for me, I did not hear Okafor making such a boast, but I cannot swear to it that he did not make it. It was not that close to me. In conclusion, I would say that Don Okafor was just incompetent to carry out such revolutionary tasks as were given to him, and that choosing him for such a delicate task was totally unfortunate. It accounted in no small measure for our loss of Lagos and the consequent loss of the revolution. The third reason for the death of the revolution was the preponderance of the forces of reaction. Why was it that there were very few senior officers in the planning and execution of the revolution? Simply because the upper echelon of the officer corps was crowded with reactionaries and revisionists. There were no less than 20 Nigerian officers in the ranks of majors and above by October 1965. But less than 10 were ready and willing to take part in the revolution. The remainder were either nonchalant or totally apathetic. Of the 10 that were ready and willing, those ones are also compromised, to take part, only 7 were really revolutionary and willing to work for the building of a new social order. The only senior revolutionary officer who was not brought into the planning at all was Lieutenant Colonel Banjo. This was because he held the view that the revolution should have a broader military base and an initial political base. On the contrary, I believe that any attempt to broaden the base or initiate political support will compromise the security of the planning and lead to our utter destruction. My stand was vindicated a few months later when during the Civil War, Major Banjo planned to invade Ibadan, but first of all, made contact and preparation through civilians. His planning was, meanwhile, just so you know, that Major Banjo is the Major Banjo that ended up fighting on the side of the Biafra with Ojukwu. Okay? It was the one that was leading that Biafran army that was leading them to Lagos from the east, that Banjo. And against the order of Ojukwu, against the advice of the Biafran war. They could, you know, when they were fighting the Biafran war, they had a group called something similar to like the Military Supreme Council of Biafra. Okay, they make decisions, they give orders. So that Banjo that you are hearing here, right, is the same Banjo when the Civil War started. You know, he fought on behalf of on the side of the Biafrans, and he was the one who was leading that war to Lagos that got stopped at Ore. All right, that today they are telling you the Biafrans were leading war to Lagos. The Igbos, they wanted to go and capture Lagos. The Yoruba man that was leading that Biafran soldiers to Lagos, his name is Major Banjo, just so you know. But you're going to hear more about him in the subsequent reading, okay? But this is them as part of the reactionary soldiers instead of revolutionary soldiers of that time. His planning was compromised, and according to this report, right, they said that plan failed because Banjo was he was confident that he could use the civilians to plan that invasion of Lagos. Because number one, there was actually no reason for Biafra to come to Lagos. You know, that's one thing that their propaganda on why you should hate the Igbos, especially if you are Yoruba, the reason why you should hate the Igbos, why that propaganda really sell very well is that, okay, you are fighting Biafra war to have your own country and all of that. Why did you bring Biafrans to? Why do you want to bring Biafrans to Yoruba land? Why do you bring the soldiers? Why do you want to bring the soldiers to Yoruba land? It was a Yoruba man who defied order of Ojukwu. And at the end, it wasn't the only person. He was executed for treason, by the way. He was shot and killed before the end of the war for disobeying Ojukwu or disobeying the command. All right. So let us continue. Yeah, he was executed after being found guilty of what do you call it? Of insubordination or something like that. So he was executed. He was killed. They even use propaganda whenever they want to talk to you, the Yorubas who are not interested in being bigots or who are not buying their bigotry. They will say, we continue supporting the Igbo, but continue supporting the Igbo. Even a Yoruba man that fought for them, they killed him. They killed that. No, that's not what happened. This is what they have succeeded in doing, in manipulating your history. Okay? A majority of those you probably saw as hero or what have you, they are like proper villains. Those you saw as villains, they are like real heroes to some extent, okay? But that's how they manage to manipulate the history in order to meet a certain agenda. A lot of people grew up to believe all these stories. The Biafrans, they killed Banjo, or the Biafrans want to take over Yoruba land. That's not what happened. And Banjo, according to them, they said Banjo in his mind believed that he could use some fraction of Nigerian soldiers to invade Lagos, the seat of power, remove Ojukwu, and possibly end the war. On his own volition, he decided to move the soldiers. He was not ordered to. That was the Biafra war. The Biafrans and the rest of them have nothing to do with the Yoruba land until Banjo moved their soldiers under Ojukwu. But let's continue. So his planning was compromised. His planning was compromised and the whole effort wasted. Nevertheless, it is still consistently alleged that some civilians helped us with the planning or with the coup. Let me declare it categorically here and now that the allegation is totally false and had no basis. Our outlook, program, and motivation did not call for the participation of civilians at the formative stage. As for Lieutenant Colonel Fajuyi, it would have been immensely useful to us if he was around. As our preparations warmed up, it was no longer possible to make contact with him, and so he did not take part. All the same, when he later joined Ironsi's military government as the governor of the Western region, he remained the one unwavering spokesman for the coup and for the revolutionary officers. His singular stand became so well known that we, in detention, knew it when Azan reportedly turned around and dubbed Fajuyi an action grouper, thus marking him for elimination come their July 29, 1966 counter coup. It was the preponderance of reaction and conservatism among the senior army officers that made our revolution to receive little or no support among them after our first strike. It was the preponderance of reactions around Nzeogu that checkmated his desire to further the cause of the revolution after his initial success. It was the preponderance of reactions that made it easy for the reactionaries to fold up our revolution even without striking a blow against us. It was as if we moved a motion in a gathering of senior officers, while the junior officers were standing around in the gallery watching. Our motion, of course, was revolutionary and popular. Hence, the junior officers cheered and applauded and rejoiced in support and shouting, "Fire, fire, fire." The older ones who were really occupying the floor frowned in consternation. And the chairman, knowing the feeling of the house, said, "In that case, let us put it to the vote." It was put to vote. We were overwhelmingly defeated. So we agreed to fold it up. The fourth reason for the failure of the revolution was that Nigeria was not yet ready for it. This was easy to see. The preponderance of reactions in the army simply reflected the preponderance of reactions in the country. Those army officers who worked resolutely to destroy our revolution were typical Nigerians. They were very much like their civilian counterparts. But the young officers were different. They were enthusiastic for change, and they would carry on the revolutionary flame as long as they were rightly channeled along the path of it. That was the reason why I was confident that we would have succeeded if we had fought from Kaduna. We would then have eliminated both men and forces of opposition and revision. It was also for this reason that Nzeogu declared that we were prepared to lose 1 million men to ensure the success of our revolution. We would certainly have won, even if we had to sacrifice a lot. To succeed in such a circumstance in their own country, Russians, with only about twice the Nigerian population, sacrificed more than 2 million people. China, in their own turn, sacrificed several millions. Now, leaving the army officers alone, why was it that the average Nigerian was concerned first and foremost for himself and next for his family? Why was it that the usual attitude of the Nigerian is to grab and grab and grab? Why was it that the Nigerian does not care about things that did not touch him personally? While the people on top use their power to benefit themselves and their families, why did the people below aspire to do more than get to the top simply to follow suit? Why? So that is going to be the end of chapter 5. It's a very long read, though. So now we have chapter 6, we have chapter 7, the Liberation Army, we have Irosi's adventure, we have chapter 8. It's up to chapter 8. Too. Hang on, where is that? Yes. So we've got chapter 8, chapter 9, jungle justice. So we'll deal with that, not tomorrow, but it's going to be maybe next time we are reading, okay? So the next book that we should not forget, except if you choose that we should finish this and then continue with this. We plan to be mixing them together, right? Anyway, so that's going to be me. I'm going to take a break and then I'm going to take calls. What's the time?
I don't even know if it does. Okay, what happened is this: I'm going to take calls for another 30, 40 minutes. Okay, then we'll wrap it up. I'll go get ready for later this evening. Okay, thank you so much for being. Thank you so much for listening. I don't know if. Sorry, 1 second. No, we will rather keep it. Okay, what we're going to do is that we will keep it as it is, and yeah, somebody said one at a time. Okay, we'll do it one at a time. So we're going to finish this. We will continue from chapter 6. Okay, so we will continue from chapter 6, and that will be next time. So history, yeah. If you pay attention, if you have the time to actually, if you care to dig into the history, the purpose of digging into history is to make sure that we are not prisoners of our own history. These are things that happened and shaped Nigeria to what Nigeria is today. Okay? History repeating itself, we have seen that. Okay? We have seen that. However, we are people who want to learn from our own history so that we do not repeat them like those who are currently in charge. Hello there.
Hello, Maiyegun General.
Hey, Babu. How are you? Is that CA?
CA. CA from Atlanta,
That
yes.
is CA from Atlanta. So you are with us today.
Yeah.
How are you today, Baba?
Yeah, fine. It's exactly 11:21 a.m. on a rainy day in Atlanta.
21. It is
21 a.m. A rainy day,
Atlanta.
very rainy day in Atlanta. Rainy, yes. Maiyegun, you are wonderful, Maiyegun. It's an amazing read, man. It's amazing. It was smooth.
Yeah.
Attention catching.
Yeah.
Man, it's amazing.
Like it's not too fast.
Sometimes when you read, you don't know.
Yeah, it's not too fast.
No,
it's not
perfect.
No?
Maiyegun, it's amazing. It's perfect.
So I'm a good reader. Then I'm a good reader. Yeah.
I tell you, it's not easy to do what you're doing. You're a good reader. Trust me. It is clear, perfect. You know, you can follow the sequence. It is amazing.
Like you can be doing something and you can just listen in and it just sound like your radio is like something is coming from there. You can tell that person is reading, but the history is like telling a story, right?
Yes, I'm at work. I don't put my headphone, you know, and just went through. I went through the Facebook, you know. I just put the work phone and my phone, in my ear. And I just it was clear and
I just love reading that. Okay, the English the words are not too harsh to pronounce and all that, so it was easy.
Yes,
and it's so communicative too. I think. CA.
So this tells you the problem of Nigeria. The problem of Nigeria didn't start today. It's been a long time coming.
A long one, Baba. A long one. Our ancestors they be mess.
Yes. So look at that speech. Look at the speech. 10%. The same thing happening today has been happening way back then. The nepotism, the tribalism, the feudal system, the north, the same thing, everything. So that tells you the Nigeria problem will be a perennial problem. It has been since day one. Since day one of the inception of contraption, putting together of that contraption called Nigeria. And that's why I'm always angry with people who allow politicians to use them through ethnic division. There's no Igbo man, there's no Hausa man, there's no Yoruba man. We have two major people. The people and the thieves who call themselves politicians that are in power.
That's always been like this. It has always been
like this. It doesn't matter if the politician, I'm an Igbo man. But God forbid me to support somebody like Anuzo Jokano or somebody like Hope Uzodimma. These are terrible idiots. So why would I now kill myself because he's an Igbo man? That's okay. Uzo should be a president because he's an Igbo man. I should vote for him. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't. When I know there will be no benefit. So people just allow themselves to be used. And it's unfortunate that people think, even those that you think that are intelligent, professors. I told this story before. I left from my university system. I called the professor one day before the election, not this last election, the one before this one. before this chariot. And we were talking, I said, Showore. He said, no. Showore is a small boy. What does he know? I was shocked.
Professor.
I was shocked. And he said, small boy, don't have the experience. What does he know? He doesn't have the capacity. And I said, okay, Buhari has the capacity because he's old or what? So the mentality of Nigerians sometimes is just baffling.
Another thing I have learned from this, what I am learning from this history now is that, you see, when you are trying to create a solution to a problem, okay, there are people that are going to pretend that they are with you. But meanwhile, they are actually looking for the loophole where they can help sabotage it, okay? Maybe for the situation, advantage of it and use that. It didn't start. That's something I just said there. That Maiyegun.
No, it didn't start today.
Maiyegun they mentioned several times here.
Look at how smooth. Look at how smooth it was.
The mind of Unzegu. Yes. Now Unzegu today is not even like reported in Nigerian history as somebody that they were so proud of until that last
nationalistic. Yes.
But today, when they talk about they talk about the coup. Oh, they killed this or that.
The coup.
The guy that's all. Eh?
It's an Igbo coup. It's an Igbo coup. He killed this, he killed that, he killed that.
A man whose parents came from Asaba. Migrated and he was born in Kaduna, grew up there.
Kaduna.
He had more than he will speak any Asaba language. Not even anything to do with Igbo. But he was actually like a hero. He was a brilliant chap guy. But they tricked him that last minute. Somebody took advantage of that. They even brought his friend from abroad, from London, to come and talk to him, or to deceive him and lure him into his death. I learned something from that one. When I'm planning to do something good, not be everybody where they come around and say, I love you. I love what you are doing. Let's do. Not be all of them love you. Chances.
Maiyegun, I was watching a documentary yesterday about that footballer, Pogba.
Pogba.
Do you know that it was his own brothers, blood brothers, that conspired against this guy? His senior brother went and collected some guys, the ambush him, wanted to rip him, extort him of $13 million. His own blood brother, senior brother. He said that he said in his interview, he said, the people that will kill you are those that are closest to you. That's what he said.
Closest to you. People who are close.
Congratulations, well done for the job. It's amazing.
You have a good one, sir.
It's amazing.
I see it. So see it from Atlanta. God bless you, bro. So there we go. There we have it. Normally the number is right there on the screen. Okay, yeah, it's right there. You can try WhatsApp. You can try direct. It's up to you. It's easier. Just copy it. Hello there.
Hello, Maiyegun.
Hello, sir. How are you?
Yeah, good. I'm fine, sir. Good evening, sir.
Good evening to you too. I would think that it should be nearly afternoon at yours there anyway.
No, this is evening in Dubai.
It is evening.
So,
pardon me.
Yeah,
I was looking at another number, not yours. Anyway, it is evening. But how is it going?
Yeah. Maiyegun,
Baba?
Fine. Thank God. How is the family, your wife, your children?
We thank God too.
Hope they're fine.
Thank you.
My regards to them.
Thank you.
And like I said last time we spoke, I told you I always watch your program because you are doing a very wonderful job. Which we have very people that will do it. Very few people that can do it. Very few.
Thanks, man.
So I appreciate your effort and the strength for you to continue. You understand? Because some people many people may have been deviated from saying the truth.
I know.
You know?
And it is easier to actually deviate these days, especially.
Yes.
It's a grace.
Because we in Dubai here, we even have people that speak for us before, but most of them they are now on their own because they have paid them off. So they don't care anymore.
They don't.
Yeah, but based on today's program, what I want to chip in is all these things is history, Maiyegun.
That's right.
All these are histories. And me now, I'm a graduate from primary school, secondary school, university, NCE and degree level. They will not teach us all these things in history in schools. They will never teach us all these
You
things.
have to find out by yourself.
They boycott all these things in our Nigerian history in school. Most of our students don't know about these things. I'm telling you. Because they know that the committed the sabotage, the damage, the killing of Igbos, the hatred. So how can we come up and start teaching the children about these things in history? So they purposely just remove it from Nigerian history.
And
they will teach us something else.
Just move on with it like that. Yes. Do you know what the Igbos did?
Yeah.
Do you know what the Igbos did? The Igbos planned the first war. I was like, are you educated at all? What do you mean? Do you know the history? I heard it from my grandma. Oh dear, man. God.
I'm telling you, Nigerian government
people. You see that part, You see that part that mentioned that banjo, that major banjo or something, right? It's such a very crucial sort of event. That's very vital. And the fact that it was also mentioned towards the end of that chapter I read there is also very, very important, okay? Because Ojukwu was in Kano. Banjo was in Kaduna with them. But somehow, Ojukwu and Banjo, who are very close to Ironsi, when Ironsi finally got Nzeogu and all of these revolutionaries locked up, right? Nzeogu moved Ojukwu from there to Kaduna, from Kano to the east. Now, that's the Ojukwu that was like neither here nor there when the revolution was taking place. He ended up being the leader of the millions of Igbos who came under the attack of his friend. Go on. Who knew they were all the same? They were all friends. You don't see Go on, Ojukwu, Banjo, and all these guys. They were actually friends. But months later, they turned to enemies and they were shooting at themselves.
Yes.
After they finished shooting Nzeogu. Who would have thought of that? How many of us who even remember that the event went that way?
It's because you know that it's possible that the Nigerian government may have contacted them separately. Yeah, it's possible. I'm telling you, okay, Maiyegun, take for instance now, look at this Asare Dokubo. Look at him. In last 3 years, he said it's not Igbo. But recently, he said it's Igbo.
I know.
Asare Dokubo. Last 3 years now, he came, he betrayed Nnamdi Kanu, and just now, because army attacked people.
Forefathers were Igbos.
Yeah. It's from Anambra, so all these things, they are sabotage. Nigerian government will never teach us history. They will never, because they know that they have done more evil in history. They will never teach us. That's why this program, this particular topic now, I will follow it up to the end, because most of us, I know about Kaduna Nzogu. I know about him from YouTube. YouTube have this history, just very few of his history.
I think almost all of them does. And a lot of people have actually done.
But this topic you're bringing up, believe me, it will go very far, because people will watch it. Many people will watch it, they will follow it up. Yes. And I also pray that evil eyes will not see you and your family, and the same with me. And I pray God will protect us in Dubai, because I have cried a lot, and I believe God will hear our cry one day.
We'll keep bringing it up as well, okay? Because it's one of the news I'm actually really looking forward to be real. See, among other things, right? See, when they say...
My children...
Yeah, go on, sorry.
My children, my daughter has come of age. That's why I refuse to tell you my name. It was intentionally, because my children have come of age.
Let's keep it that way. You see, there's one prayer that I always have, right? There's one news that I always want to see that it is true. And it is the news of if these guys, right, will eventually clear the backlog they are hiding away from or hiding from. And then the news says, oh, finally, they have cleared the issue of UAE and Nigeria, because it is beyond just people saying they are going on holiday in Dubai. People's lives have been put on hold by Bukhari's fraud for more than 3 years.
Bukhari go pay Nigeria. They abandoned Nigeria. Nigeria will be in Dubai now, just like IDC.
When I read it anywhere that the Dubai this thing is resolved, it's beyond just the news, because it is deeper. People's lives, people's livelihood, people's, you know what I mean? They've put them on hold for years now. So I know about it, Baba. And I really hope,
thank you so much.
That will pop up.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
God bless you.
God will make a way.
Thank
you so much.
You know, because there's some things that we cannot actually really, when you know that there's nothing you can really do except at a point where you say, okay, can we actually give support to this family? How can we support you in this way or that way? Sure, you get now. That's the kind of thing that is really a time that we can do from this platform. Sure, you get.
I put my hope. Yes, my children have to pull out of school. My daughter, my son.
I can only imagine, Baba. Yeah. Sure, you get now. If you are in a place where you are a target, not that you don't have, not only that you don't have papers that is officially not going to be approved. The fact that that you can't walk in a place and you have to I actually have an idea what it means, so I can only imagine it.
With family, people, you can imagine. It's too much, but God is my strength here. And God will make a way for us.
Keep being strong, okay? We will talk
and
more. Sure, you guys. When we think that,
I will keep watching your program. Whenever I have my chance to call, I will call you.
God bless
so we can
man.
speak.
God bless you. You have a good one.
Send my regards to your wife.
Thank
you so much.
Bless you. You see, that's what we can do. There are people who are in some areas where the Nigeria's dysfunctional system still affects them, even when they have left, thousands of miles away from Nigeria. The Nigeria's, corruption and all of that still touches them in far away. They did nothing wrong. Your country, you had the business with all this airline. You didn't allow them to take their money. You have their money trapped in your banks, and yet you won't give them their money. So the people who are there, who are likely living in the UAE legitimately with their normal UAE visa and all of that, they are now those who are paying the supreme price, because your country won't let the money of the businesses from Dubai or from UAE to take their money back to their country for years now. That caused the stagnation of the lives of the people who have no business with Nigeria other than that's a green passport. So I can only imagine what it is like. So again, there's also little we can do when you know what is the cause and where this is coming from. The solution is very simple. Pay them their money and they will lift the visa ban. And everybody who is working in Dubai or living there, they can have their life back. It's as simple as that. But they won't. Sorry for keeping you waiting, okay? Hello there.
Hello, Maiyegun. Good morning. This is Festus Oshifeso.
Say that again, sorry.
This is Festus Oshifeso calling.
Sir Festus Oshifeso. Oh, Baba, how are you today?
I'm doing good. I just want to say a big thank you for reading the book While We Stuck and FRLS people. What is interesting is my grandma's house in Lagos, we had a tenant. It was actually the author of the book While We Stuck. So ever since I was young, I've been following Nigeria's history. And I have a quick question to ask.
He once lived in your mom's house, right, in Lagos?
Yeah. I grew up having my grandpa telling us histories about Nigeria and right. The author, we call him Mr. Daddy Onyekon. Oh. He had a daughter then. Yeah, he's deceased now, but we knew about the stories of the Coup and all that, which is interesting to me.
It's mostly like right now for you, Baba. When I was reading that, it's more kind of you have more connection to it than some of us can even relate to it, right? Because you can easily say, "Oh, Daddy Onyekon," right?
Yeah, I'll say so. Yeah.
Anyway,
I'll say so.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't live in Nigeria anymore. I'm currently in the US, but it hurts when sometimes we go back home for Christmas, and my cousins are not home. Christmas or New Year's, the many are working 12-hour shift to the UK, which is terrible. Normally, we all have like family time together with grandparents, but that doesn't happen anymore, which is tragic. But the question I have concerning the reading, are you going to be reading one after the other, or you want to finish one book before the other one?
Well, we were supposed to be mixing them so that, we could make sure that we end them all, both of them together. But it seems that everybody is voting for, no, finish this. No, finish this. We'll continue that one later.
Yeah. So I've read both books, and I find a Fatherless People a lot more comprehensive and explosive. When you want to talk about the Yoruba-Igbo rivalry, it says a lot about that in the Fatherless People, and it's very interesting. But I'm down to follow along with whatever it is that you choose to do.
There you go. So the plan is that we can wrap this up maybe in another 2 days, right? We could finish it with
Would you
go on? Sorry.
Will you start all over again from the Fatherless People, because you actually started quite well with that one, from the history of colonization and whatnot? So I'm just wondering how you go about that.
And just because we haven't really gone too deep, we probably, you see, let me see that again, where we were. Yeah, you remember we have finished the part of the colonization of Yoruba land, okay? So we're about to start that part of the colonization of Niger Delta and move it on from there. I don't think we've gone too far. So we could possibly just continue from there, right? But again, if I have to put that to a vote, okay? I mean, I've read about 80 pages already, okay? So if we feel like, in order for it to, then we can start from the start. Or don't let me promise that.
Okay.
You know why I'm saying that?
And another
why I'm actually trying not to be, I'm not too sure what to say is that since we've already read this part and it's already out there, it's recorded, you know what I mean? Like, just like this one, okay?
Yeah.
It is already published, and whoever wants to kind of catch up can actually catch up. I've cut them into smaller parts as well, and I've actually released them. So I don't think we will start from the beginning on that Fatherless People. We'll just continue.
Okay.
Okay. But we will make sure that we finish this first. Sorry, Baba. 2 things to say. I wanted to correct you on something you said about what Nigeria also have been named instead of Nigeria. The guy that created the Royal Nigeria Company, George Todban Goldie. Nigeria would have been named Goldisia, not Goldies like you mentioned. I was just like, you know me now. You know me. I got to that. You finish it, right? I got to that part and I was like, okay, right. Instead of Nigerians, will be called the Goldians. But what did you say it will be called again, sir?
Goldisia, just like Rhodesia. Goldisia, yeah.
Okay.
And I also follow the author, Dele Ogun, on Twitter. And the last time I sent a message, I was like, hey, I actually, recommended this book for a YouTuber, Maiyegun, to read. And along the line, I was like, it would actually be nice if you can come on to Maiyegun's show and, talk about, some things, because I've been following Dele Ogun for quite a while. Yeah. And he has a YouTube channel where he says some things about like Nigeria. And one that was quite interesting was how he said there was a British guy called Howard Smith. He was brought in by the last Governor General, I think Richardson, to basically rig the election of 1959 or 1960 with the first election. So Dele Ogun has quite a few interesting videos on his YouTube video, but I told him like, hey, it would be nice to come on Maiyegun's show and speak your mind about and he was like, yeah, sure, yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And what did he say?
But he said it will be down. I actually sent a screenshot of you and reading the book on his Twitter, on his message on Twitter. Right. And it was like, wow, that's interesting. But I want to say thank you very much again for the work that you're doing. Not just reading the book, but day in, day out, putting in so much work, effort, energy in educating us Nigerians about the situation of our country. I'm also from Ijebu, by the way, even though I've never been there, but I appreciate the work that you're doing.
What part of Ijebu?
Ijebu, Abigi.
Oh, Abigi, Waterside, all those area.
Yeah, Waterside, yeah. The story apparently was 3 brothers left Ile-Ife, and one settled in Ijebu Ode, and our one side settled in Ijebu Waterside. Yeah.
But there's a part of our history that actually said that too. And you are somebody I believe is doing enough to know more about all these things, because you actually recommended this indeed. I remember very well. You did. Say, man, we're going to get that.
I'm well read in I really like history, and I guess I was one of those unfortunate folks that's been so whitewashed and brainwashed. But I love history, so when I started to read so much of like European and American history, I now started to see, these people are not heroes. They are they are actually different from being heroes.
I know.
And when you start to see what they've done to when you start to see what they've done to our nations and what our leaders who are quite blind, deaf, and dumb, then you start to really wonder why, or what change could there be. I don't think Nigeria is going to change in our lifetime, because Nigeria is working the way Britain created it to be.
Yeah.
We are still a British colony, so.
But there's something I'm also learning, right? There's something I'm also learning, following, which is why you see this is why we struck, and the use, the use of word, or let me say the word use in there, right? They are like some a dosage of revolution or something in them. Okay, they're like words of possibility. That if you have that mind, somebody like yourself now who believes that something needed to be done, things are wrong and all that. There are people who don't understand this whole thing at all. Their own is just to wake up normally and just do what they say they should do, and they just go about life like that. They have no clue, no idea, and they have no attempt to. But there are some of us who have these curious minds, and because you have curious mind, I have curious mind, I want to know more, and the more I know, possibly the more angry I become of why is this or that. Now, what this kind of things does, or exposes like this does, is that there are some people that we are already indoctrinating by what we are doing. Do you get that now?
Yeah.
So our lifetime may not see the total change that we really want it to be, but there is a possibility that even in our lifetime, we are going to see the kickoff of what we want to see happen, even if we are not going to be here when they happen. So we hold this coming generation a lot, okay? Especially to try to get as many of them as possible to be politically conscious, have revolutionary mind, recommend books for them. Some will watch this broadcast and they will just go and buy the book. Some will be here, young people, right? They will listen to some of the stuff here, they will go and do more researches. And in the process, they are becoming more aware and aware. So if we have enough generation who are not educated in that way, okay, like well informed, there's an advantage in that, Baba. There is, and that's why I don't want to rule it out completely. So let's keep trying.
I would hope so, but the role religion is playing, it's detrimental. I don't know how
Baba. You know something I discovered? I discovered that two things are so important if we want all we are doing to actually, sort of make impacts. All right, two things will happen. It is either after identifying all the problems, all the players and the rest of them, there are some certain things that we would have to do them ourselves. For example, if I am convinced that none of this that we are doing would ever be achieved without us having access to power, without power, and then using that to actually really drive that your ideology, right? Some of us then would have to actually volunteer ourselves, push ourselves forward, than wait for some people to do some certain things, okay? And then we could face the entire system. If now fight, we'll fight. Sure, you get. Yeah, you will really have the face. You have the face of, you know what? This is what we are fighting for now. We want to get rid of all of the political, for example, all the political criminals in Yoruba land. And when I was reading that Fatherless People, right, when they talk about, when he wrote, he wrote about how they captured Yoruba land, like colonization of Yoruba land. But he did say, there's a discovery there about the role the traditional rulers were also playing, okay? I think I also felt that in this, why we struck as well. Twice now in these two books, they've written about how the traditional institutions of Yoruba land, for example, compromised, how it all happened, how they became part and parcel. When the colonialists were there, they are with them. When they say neo-colonialists, our own people were there, they are with them. So until we have a group of people that knows that if we want to really get things done, then we have to get rid of these guys. And I say get rid of them.
And one other thing you should,
go on.
One other thing people should understand is for wherever it is that we're fighting for, if Yorubas and Igbos keep on hating each other, nothing is going to be done.
Nothing is going to happen.
Absolutely nothing will be done. I did school. I left Nigeria up until SS2 before I moved to the US. And for the most part, primary school, secondary school, I had classmates who were Igbos, Edos, Yorubas, and I couldn't really make any distinction because the area of Lagos I grew up at, even in the US, you go to anywhere in the US in school, if your classmate is Emeka or wherever, you know you guys are Nigerian, you help each other out. But I don't see Hausa, I don't see Fulanis here. So I have a lot in common with Igbos until I started to read so much about like the history, and I think the history has always been the first was like an Igbo. But when you now read so much more, you become more enlightened. It was like a class struggle, educated soldiers who have revolutionary attitude to change the course of the country. That was what happened. It's terrible what's going on now.
It's really bad that they actually miss. You know what I mean? Like, these guys felt like, but I'll put it this way, right? I am somebody who believes that if I have all the tools needed, right? Like all I need to possibly change that system. For example, get rid of I'm just saying it in a broader context now, okay? Let's say I have that and I'm a young person, not too young anyway. So I'm a young person, I'm like, I've got all I need. I've got all the men and the rest, right? I could move in and begin to pick each of them, just like these guys also felt, because the only difference between us and Nzeogu right now and their guys, right, is that we are here sad and unhappy that these rogues have bastardized the system and they have actually like impoverished the people and make it worse. Okay, we are here. That's exactly what they felt too. But what they did different was that they knew what they wanted and they knew what to remove. Like, this is out of the way, right? Then things can continue in the right formation. So the only difference between them and us is that we must go beyond talking. We must go into acting, and we are going into that state of acting soon.
How do we act when most of the educated Nigerians are fleeing, jackpine out of Nigeria to greener pastures, so they say, and we're now left with the likes of, in future, MC Olomos to be leaders of the country? How would they negotiate on behalf of Nigerians and the country against the colonialists who are still there? But I don't want to take too much of your time. I'll be calling a little bit more, and thank you so much. And hopefully we'll try to get Dele Ogun
onto your show. Create a space and all of that, and then we kind of have that chat here. It will be so wonderful for somebody like that. I can only just imagine the level of research that he put into that work there. So you can.
He did so much research. The research he did wasn't from what happened. He did research based off of those that created Nigeria, everything in archives, the letters are sent amongst themselves. He read their autobiographies. So the real intention, it wasn't just Lugard or those in the colonial office in Whitehall in London. It was their masterminded work that he did research on. I think it took him about 25 years to write that book, and I found it very explosive. It's got a lot of similarities with why we talk.
No joke.
Yeah.
Like he just went to he went to the basic, right? Dug everything he could see and dug that out. I refine that and check what they are and they are, and then it's like me reading from the ancient time until I have to remind myself, I'm like, this whole thing is like 200 years ago. This is just like 200 years ago. Why is it sounding like it's, and people they write? See, Baba, of course, it will be an honor to have somebody like that with us here, and we would have to prepare for that, right? So that we are not sounding
thank you very much.
To him, right?
Thank you very much, and keep up your good work.
God bless you. You take it easy, okay? Nice one, eh? So that's a good one. We have just been told that we might be honored to have the author of A Fatherless People, Dele Ogun, with us. He's on YouTube. I mean, I'm going to go check out this page and possibly take my time to listen to some of them too. Sure you get? Because like, if I am so like so vast, so deep, so far-read research here and there, to the point that I could write a book like that. I would be like a walking encyclopedia, Wikipedia encyclopedia. So I'm going to call it an afternoon. I will see us some other time, which is going to be later this evening, possibly. And thank you so much for spending your morning and afternoon with me again. It's been a pleasure. I'll take a break and I will see you later. Good afternoon.
Maiyegun làwa mọ̀ làmọ̀ tó dòdòdò.
Maiyegun Diary Nayibi #1.
Maiyegun làwa mọ̀ làmọ̀ tó dòdòdò.
Maiyegun Diary Nayibi #1.
Maiyegun ti dé o ọ̀rẹ́ ara yìí.
Maiyegun Diary Nayibi #1.
Lórí Facebook, lórí YouTube.
Maiyegun Diary Nayibi #1.
Gbogbo bó ṣe ń lọ ni Maiyegun já wa sí.
Maiyegun Diary Nayibi #1.
Àṣírí ọ̀jẹ̀lú kì í bò níbẹ̀ o.
Maiyegun Diary Nayibi #1.
Bó bá ṣe eré àní Maiyegun máa wí.
Maiyegun Diary Nayibi #1.
Ó sì tún ṣe eré wàá gbọ́ níbẹ̀ o.
Maiyegun Diary Nayibi #1.
Maiyegun Diary politico.
Maiyegun Diary Nayibi #1.
Godfatherism kò sí lọ́rọ̀ Maiyegun.
Maiyegun Diary Nayibi #1.
Ẹ farabalẹ̀ sẹ́ o kẹgọ́rọ̀ lẹ́nu o.
Maiyegun Diary Nayibi #1.
Àní Maiyegun làwa mọ̀ tó dòdòdò.
Maiyegun Diary Nayibi #1.
Àní ẹ̀sùn ràkì.
Maiyegun ti dé. Maiyegun ti dé.
Ọ̀jẹ̀lú ẹ̀sùn ràkì.
Maiyegun ti dé.
Àní ẹ̀sùn ràkì.
Maiyegun ti dé.
Lórí Facebook.
Maiyegun ti dé.
Àní ẹ̀sùn ràkì.
Maiyegun ti dé.
Lórí YouTube.
Maiyegun ti dé.
Àní ẹ̀sùn ràkì.
Maiyegun ti dé.
Bọ́ bàbá gbé wúrẹ́.
Maiyegun máa wí.
Àní ẹ̀sùn ràkì.
Maiyegun ti dé.
Ijó ìgbádìyẹ.
Maiyegun máa wí.
Àní ẹ̀sùn ràkì.
Maiyegun ti dé.
Prẹ̀sìdó bá rúfin o.
Maiyegun máa wí.
Àní ẹ̀sùn ràkì.
Maiyegun ti dé.
Kí gómìnà kówó jẹ.
Maiyegun máa wí.
Àní ẹ̀sùn ràkì.
Maiyegun ti dé.
Ọlọ́pàá tí ń darí bá.
Maiyegun máa wí.
Àní ẹ̀sùn ràkì.
Maiyegun ti dé.
Aṣòfin tí ń rúfin o.
Maiyegun máa wí.
Àní ẹ̀sùn ràkì.
Maiyegun ti dé.
Òpùrọ́ olóṣèlú.
Maiyegun máa wí.
Àní ẹ̀sùn ràkì.
Maiyegun ti dé.
Ọ̀jẹ̀lú ẹ̀sùn ràkì.
Maiyegun ti dé.
Àní ẹ̀sùn ràkì.
Maiyegun ti dé.
Maiyegun ti dé. Gbogbo ọ̀jẹ̀lú ẹ̀sùn ràkì. Maiyegun ti dé. Gbogbo ọ̀jẹ̀lú ẹ̀sùn ràkì. Ṣùgbọ́n ní bá ti ṣe èyí tó yẹ kí wọ́n ṣe, ọmọ bá dèrò ní fi wọ́n níran o.
Maiyegun ti dé. Gbogbo ọ̀jẹ̀lú ẹ̀sùn ràkì. Maiyegun ti dé. Gbogbo ọ̀jẹ̀lú ẹ̀sùn ràkì. Ṣùgbọ́n ní bá ti ṣe èyí tó yẹ kí wọ́n ṣe, ọmọ bá dèrò ní fi wọ́n níran.
Wọ́n fowó bẹ́ẹ̀ o, Maiyegun ó sọ pé wọ́n ò fẹ́ bẹ́ẹ̀. Wọ́n fowó bẹ́ẹ̀, Maiyegun ó sọ pé wọ́n ò fẹ́ bẹ́ẹ̀. Oníkan ṣáàtì ṣe èyí tó yẹ kí wọ́n ṣe fáwọn ará ìlú tó gbé wọ́n débẹ̀ o ayé.
Maiyegun ti dé gbogbo ọ̀jẹ̀lú ẹ̀ súnra kì. Maiyegun ti dé gbogbo ọ̀jẹ̀lú ẹ̀ súnra kì. Ṣùgbọ́n ní má ti ṣe yìí tó yẹ kí wọ́n ṣe ọmọ bá dẹ́rọ̀ ò ní fi wọ́n níran.
Kì máa yí ṣe eré ọ̀rọ̀ yìí kì í ṣe ẹ̀fẹ̀. Kì máa yí ṣe eré ọ̀rọ̀ yìí kì í ṣe ẹ̀fẹ̀. Ẹni bá ti lè lẹ́bọ̀ lẹ́rù o ọmọ bá dèrò kàṣàyè tú wọn síta.
Maiyegun ti dé gbogbo ọ̀jẹ̀lú ẹ̀ súnra kì. Maiyegun ti dé gbogbo ọ̀jẹ̀lú ẹ̀ súnra kì. Ṣùgbọ́n ní bá ti ṣe yìí tó yẹ kí wọ́n ṣe ọmọ bá dẹ́rọ̀ ò ní fi wọ́n níran.
Tẹnitẹni ọmọ Maiyegun ọ̀rẹ́ ara ìlú mọ̀mọ́ ni mo fọlọ́hún ṣọ́ ẹ̀ bá kìlẹ́bù. Lóòótọ́ olódodo ìlú ọ̀tá ìlú mọ̀mọ́ ni ìwọ ṣá máa ń ṣọ́ra kò sì mọ́ bẹ̀rù. Bọ́tà ń lè rí bóníṣègùn lé káwọn mọ̀mọ́ fi ṣera wọn ni ó ti dẹrùn tí wọn ò gbọ́dọ̀ sè mọ́bẹ̀. Èèpo ọ̀bọ lọmọ bá dérò tàjẹ́ ò gbọ́dọ̀ jẹ́ ó ti jọba lórí àbínú ẹni kò sì mọ́ fòyà. Àìsíwọ́lu ní ẹnìkẹ́ ìgbódì ẹyin lábàrá o ó kó ẹni tó bá dán o àkàmù. Maiyegun ti dé gbogbo ọ̀jẹ̀lú ẹ̀ túnra kì. Maiyegun ti dé gbogbo ọ̀jẹ̀lú ẹ̀ túnra kì o. Ẹni bá ti ṣe yìí tó yẹ kí wọ́n ṣe ọmọ bá dèrò òní fi wọ́n níran o.
Maiyegun ti dé gbogbo ọ̀jẹ̀lú ẹ̀ súnra kì. Maiyegun ti dé gbogbo ọ̀jẹ̀lú ẹ̀ súnra kì. Ṣùgbọ́n ní bá ti ṣe yìí tó yẹ kí wọ́n ṣe ọmọ bá dẹ́rọ̀ ò ní fi wọ́n níran.